The Evolution of a Bad Boy, written by Susanna Thompson, narrated by Sarah Sampino. Chapter 1. Dylan knew within the first half hour of their date that the rumors about Cameron weren't true. He could see it in the guarded way she held herself around him. She also kept sneaking glances at Jake, who was obviously extremely jealous that Cameron was out with Dylan. He played his game of seduction with her anyway, even though he knew that she wouldn't end up in his bed tonight. He had nothing better to do, and she was much hotter than her usual tomboy attire had led him to believe. Dylan preferred wild girls because they were sexy and exciting, and he didn't have to wait for what he wanted from them. Yet flirting with Cameron turned out to be more fun than he had anticipated. There was a thrilling moment when he knew that he had broken through her defenses and made her hot for him. It was only a kiss, and she soon became distracted by Jake, but it gave him a taste for the challenge of a good girl. He decided that this would be his new way of amusing himself when he was bored at school. Dylan was going to pick a good girl and flirt with her. There was no point in trying to continue anything with Cameron, because she was completely into Jake. He would offer, of course, but he was sure that she wouldn't take him up on it. No, he would pick some girl that didn't have a boyfriend. Boyfriends could be a problem, but he had risked it before if the payoff was worth it. This time it wouldn't be, because he didn't plan to sleep with the girl. Despite his reputation, he wasn't that much of a dick. He wouldn't use some innocent girl that way, not when he had his pick of willing girls. This was just going to be seduction without actual sex. It was going to be harmless fun both for him and the girl he chose. On Monday, he did the opposite of what he usually did. His eyes skimmed past the girls he usually looked at and lingered on the girls he usually ignored. He realized that there were a lot of girls that weren't on his radar due to the demure way they dressed and behaved. Some of them seemed painfully shy and blushed when he made eye contact with them. He watched them, wondering which one to pick. Many of them didn't realize how cute they were and were oblivious to the glances that they received from equally shy guys. To make it a bigger challenge, Dylan decided on the one who seemed to be the most shy and quiet around boys. He learned that her name was Melissa, and he followed her to her locker at the end of the school day. "Hey, Melissa." He was standing behind her as he spoke. She looked like a startled doe as she turned to face him. He stepped closer to her, and she immediately backed up. Dylan smiled at her and introduced himself. He asked her if she would like to go to a movie on Friday, and her brown eyes got even bigger. She seemed to be frozen in shock, but she shrank away from him as he reached out a hand to touch her cheek. "Leave her alone," a female voice ordered. Dylan turned to look at the girl standing beside Melissa. Her name was Celeste, and she was a good girl too, but she wasn't shy like Melissa. She was their student body president, and she looked pissed. "Mind your own business," Dylan said. "It's my business if I see a fellow student getting harassed." Her blue eyes were blazing in anger. His own anger flared. "I was just talking to her." He tried to resume his flirty tone with Melissa. "I wasn't bothering you, was I, Melissa?" No," she stammered. "I have to catch my bus." She fled before he could offer her a ride. Dylan glared at Celeste. "What's your problem?" "You were trying to touch her, and she was obviously scared." Celeste looked haughtily at him. "She has enough sense to keep her distance from you. Too bad so many other girls don't." The reason he had been so successful at seducing so many girls was because he could read a situation and change his tactics accordingly. He realized that Celeste would be an even bigger challenge than Melissa. "Are you jealous?" She fixed a look of contempt on him. "Of what? All your meaningless one-night stands?" He stepped closer to her, but she stood her ground. "They're not one-night stands. They always come back for more." "That just proves that they don't learn from their mistakes." She wasn't getting flustered and breaking eye contact. He was used to girls who were confident in their powers of attraction, but Celeste was confident in a different way. She would definitely be a challenge, but he had already gotten her attention.
"Have you ever lived in the moment?"
She snorted. "That's your line? Well, you get points for originality. At least you didn't call me baby or tell me how great you are in bed." He smiled.
"When you're good at something, you don't have to compliment yourself. If a guy tells you he's good in bed, that's a sign that he's not. If you want to know about me, the other girls will tell you. Or you can just find out for yourself."
"No thanks," she replied breezily. "I have no desire to be a notch on your belt." This was too good of an opportunity to pass up.
"I'm not wearing a belt,"
he replied smoothly and lifted his shirt to show her. Her eyes involuntarily dropped to his waist, and she looked away quickly. It was the first chink in her armor, and he decided to quit while he was ahead.
"It's been fun, Celeste, but I've got places to go and people to do."
He was sure he felt her eyes on him as he sauntered away. Chapter 2. Celeste was annoyed that Dylan was suddenly flirting with her. He wasn't the only player at school, but he was the worst, or the best, according to all those shameless girls who made no secret about having slept with him. Sure, he was attractive, but they should want more than that in a guy. He drew the wrong kind of attention, and people were already noticing his interest in Celeste. Her reputation had taken a hit lately, and this wasn't helping matters. She decided to put a stop to this right away. Dylan seemed to somehow know her schedule, because he happened to turn up everywhere she went, even though he wasn't in all her classes. She waited until after school when he approached her by her locker, which was right beside Melissa's locker. He took the opportunity to say hi to Melissa, and Celeste saw how nervous and uneasy the girl was around him. "I want to talk to you alone," Celeste snapped at him.
"You don't have to fight over me. I can keep both of you satisfied."
He smiled his sexy smile. Damn it, when had she started thinking that Dylan's smile was sexy? That must not be true, because you said yourself that a man who brags isn't good in bed.
"Then I guess I'll just have to prove it to you."
He put a hand against Melissa's locker as he leaned over her.
"Actions speak louder than words. Don't you agree?"
The poor girl was blushing furiously, and she looked like she might pass out at any moment. Celeste grabbed his arm and pulled him away from Melissa. "I told you to leave her alone." Dylan flashed that sinful smile again.
"I guess she can't wait to find out for herself. You're not the jealous type, are you, Melissa?"
The way he said her name sounded so intimate. The locker was definitely the only thing that was keeping Melissa from falling to the floor as she stared at Dylan speechlessly. Celeste was watching his technique and realized how effective his repetition of the girl's name was, along with his eye contact with her. All he needed was a firm handshake, and he had a great strategy for business. She shook herself out of going off on a mental tangent and focused on the task at hand. "Dylan," she hissed, "let's go."
"I'm coming, Celeste. See you later, Melissa."
She looked immensely relieved as he turned away from her. Celeste realized that she was still holding onto his arm only after they began walking down the hall together. She let go, and he wrapped that arm around her waist. People were openly staring at them, and she forcefully removed his arm. "Let go!"
"Oh, you can touch me, but I can't touch you."
His voice had a light, teasing quality at the moment, as his dark eyes regarded her in amusement. "I was trying to get you away from Melissa. It's not like I wanted to touch you," she said through gritted teeth.
"We have to talk about this jealous streak of yours,"
he said, and grinned at her. She decided not to get drawn into denials that he would only ignore. "Do you drive to school?"
"Yeah. You need a ride?"
His wicked smile was back, and he was so transparent about the double meaning of that last word. Celeste rolled her eyes. "I have my own car."
"I have a bike. so I can give you a better ride than that."
His stupid innuendos wouldn't work if his voice didn't sound so sexy. She stepped outside and didn't hold the door open for him as he followed her. Various girls said hi to him, and he greeted them all by name. Celeste kept walking until she reached her car. Dylan stood beside her, effortlessly oozing sex appeal.
"Do you want to give me a ride, Celeste?"
"I don't want to give you anything, Dylan." She copied the way he said her name. "I just want to know what the hell you're doing. Why the sudden interest in Melissa? She's not exactly your type."
"Why are you so worried about Melissa?"
He sounded genuinely curious. "Because she's too sweet and innocent for you. She would be devastated if you had a one-night stand with her and moved on." Celeste held up her hand to stop his protest. "A fling, or whatever you want to call it."
"You seem very sure that I can seduce her,"
he said thoughtfully. "Do you think you can't?" Celeste asked in surprise. He regarded her for a moment with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, but she had the impression that he was thinking strategy.
"That's what I plan to find out."
"Why? You haven't answered that question yet. Why are you going after Melissa when you have all these girls chasing after you?" She was thinking that she was going to have to talk to the poor girl, but she didn't know if it would help. Melissa already seemed overwhelmed by his attention. He decided to exaggerate the truth to get a rise out of her.
"I want to see what it's like to be with a good girl."
"You can't do that. I'll report you for harassment if you don't leave her alone," she threatened. He thought Celeste was sexy when she was all riled up like this, with her blue eyes flashing fire at him.
"It's not harassment if she doesn't tell me to stop."
He had her on that one, and she knew it.
"You could persuade me to leave her alone if you take her place."
She looked like she was ready to hit him. "I'm not going to sleep with you just to get you to leave her alone."
"You misunderstood me. I just want to see if I can seduce a good girl. I'll stop asking out Melissa and focus on you," he clarified.
"Oh, sure, that's easy," she said in relief.
"Are you so sure that you can resist me?"
When he asked that question, she wondered if he had heard the rumors about her. Amazingly, he seemed to pick up on her thoughts.
"Spending the night with one guy doesn't make you a wild girl, Celeste."
The understanding in his eyes flustered her in a way that all his sexual innuendos hadn't been able to. She gathered her resolve before she looked at him again. "I'll play your game if you tell everyone that I'm your girlfriend." She delighted in having thrown the consummate player off balance.
"You want to be my girlfriend?"
Dylan asked in disbelief. "No, I just want you to pretend that I'm your girlfriend. Hanging around you isn't exactly going to help my reputation, so you're going to treat me differently than you do all your other girls. That means you can't sleep around while we pretend to be together." He barked out a laugh.
"You can't be serious."
"Are you really that much of a slave to your hormones?" Celeste smirked.
"Are you really that sure that you're immune to your hormones?"
Dylan countered. A wicked smile played over his lips.
"Whoever holds out the longest wins the game. I bet you'll sleep with me before I have sex with another girl."
"You're on." Celeste already felt victorious. She would win this game within a week. Chapter 3. Dylan didn't have a lot of guy friends. He wasn't involved in sports or anything to do with school spirit. Most of his friends were girls, oddly enough, even though he had slept with most of them. He wasn't the kind of guy to turn a cold shoulder to a girl after he got her into bed, although he made it clear that he wasn't looking for love. There were no lies about monogamy between him and his women. He did think of them as women, because all of them had sexual experience before he ever laid a hand on them. In fact, they were as likely to call him when they were in the mood as he was to call one of them. He liked girls, and they liked him. Everybody knew about his reputation, but he never went around bragging about which girls he had done. That was one of the reasons why they were so friendly with him. Now he was going to lie to them for the first time ever. He was walking down the hall with Celeste to history, which was one of the classes they had together. Kayla spotted him and sashayed over to talk. He could tell what was on her mind just by the way she swayed her hips. "Hey, Dylan. My parents are going out of town this weekend. You should come over." Her parents went out of town a lot, and Dylan had spent many nights at her house. Celeste smirked at him, and he could tell that she thought he was already going to lose the bet.
"I can't. I'm with Celeste."
"All weekend?" Kayla asked, with a suggestive smile that told him she was open to spending some alone time with him.
"Yes, she's my girlfriend."
He slung an arm around Celeste's shoulders. Kayla's smile dimmed. "Your girlfriend?" "Yes," Celeste confirmed. "I'm his girlfriend." Kayla ignored her as she stared at Dylan. She was beginning to look upset, and she spun around and took off without another word. Celeste tried to shrug him off as they resumed walking to class, but he tightened his grip.
"You're not getting cold feet now, are you, girlfriend?"
Dylan challenged. In answer, she hooked her arm around his waist and smiled falsely at him. His smile was real, because he knew that he was going to win. Her stipulation that he pretend to be her boyfriend required a show of affection from her, too. It would be easy to seduce her, since he had an excuse to touch her. Her presence was going to cause problems with his other women, if Kayla's reaction was any indication. No girl had ever been singled out as special until now. He had never planned to sleep with Melissa, but Celeste wasn't as innocent. Since she had interfered in his life and stirred up trouble, he was going to make it worth his while. He was going to have Celeste in his bed. She suddenly tightened her hold on him, and he looked at her and followed the direction of her gaze. Her ex-boyfriend, Andrew, was charging toward them with a scowl on his face.
"What do you think you're doing, Celeste?"
"I'm walking to class," she replied calmly, but her death grip on Dylan betrayed her distress.
"Why are you letting Dylan hang all over you?"
Andrew demanded. "That's none of your business," Celeste said. "We broke up, remember?"
"She's my girlfriend,"
Dylan explained. Andrew laughed derisively.
"Since when do you have girlfriends?" "Since you were stupid enough to lose Celeste,"
Dylan told him. Andrew glared at him.
"I can't believe that you would sink this low,"
he said to Celeste.
"Excuse us. We have to get to class."
Dylan maneuvered Celeste past Andrew. He waited until they were further down the hallway before he spoke again.
"Are you okay?"
Her lips twisted into a painful parody of a smile. "Fine." He leaned over to speak into her ear.
"The next time your fingers dig into me that hard, you won't be thinking about him."
Celeste quickly let go of him and stepped away, but his words had wrought the desired effect. Dylan had changed her mood. He noticed that she seemed embarrassed, but that was better than seeing her upset. Chapter 4. The news about Dylan and Celeste dating spread like wildfire through the school. They were such an unlikely couple that even people who didn't normally care about who was dating whom commented on it. Celeste's friends were completely shocked. She had dated Andrew, a nice boy that you could bring home to your parents. Now, she was with Dylan, a wild boy that parents wouldn't want anywhere near their daughters. How could she explain this to her friends? She realized that she hadn't thought this through when she impulsively made the bet with Dylan. Celeste thought about calling off the bet, but she didn't want him to think that she was afraid of succumbing to his seduction. She wanted to prove to him that he couldn't have every girl. Besides wanting to keep him away from Melissa, there was also another reason that Celeste had told Dylan to pretend she was his girlfriend. She had denied the rumors about herself, and nobody but her friends had believed her. Even her boyfriend had broken up with her because he didn't believe her. Celeste was still angry about the whole thing and was now recklessly egging them on. If they wanted to believe the worst of her, then she would really give them something to talk about. Anyway, she was sure that this would be over soon. Dylan probably wouldn't last longer than a week without sex. "He's much nicer than you think," Celeste said. "We started talking, and he asked me out." That was a lame explanation, but her friends were hanging on her every word. They were just as curious about this odd pairing as everyone else. "He's so hot!" Lily exclaimed. So much for trying to convince them that she had been won over by his personality, Celeste thought wryly. She couldn't deny what Lily had said. Dylan was extremely attractive, with his lean but not too skinny body and his dark, good looks. It was more than what he looked like, however, that made him so hot. There was something magnetic about him. Everything from the sound of his voice to the way he moved was sexy. He had an intense sensuality that was hard to ignore. Celeste was going to do just that, because she was a person who wasn't easily distracted from her goals. Also, the only time that sex was on her mind was when someone else mentioned it. It didn't appeal to her, because it seemed nasty and messy. She wanted to put it off as long as possible, and this had become a problem with Andrew after a few months of dating. It had put a strain on their relationship even before the incident at the party a couple of months ago. Celeste knew that Andrew had broken up with her not only because he believed that she had cheated on him, but also because he thought she had given another guy what she had denied him. It made her furious to know that he thought she would give it up in one night to a random guy after saying no to her boyfriend for 8 months. Her friend Olivia was more concerned about her decision to go out with Dylan than Lily was. Just because stupid people spread a rumor about you doesn't mean that you have to completely trash your reputation. People will believe what they want to believe anyway. I'm not going to worry about what they think anymore. Celeste had been feeling restless and bored with her usual routine, which was why she had gone to that disastrous party in the first place. She had wanted to do something different. Unfortunately, her first drink had led to many more, and she had lost herself in an alcoholic haze. "Has he kissed you yet?" Lily asked. "No, we just started dating." Celeste wondered what her friends would think if they knew about her bet with Dylan. She was going to wait until he lost to tell them about it. It would be amusing to see how long he held out. "I hope you know what you're doing," Olivia commented. Celeste knew exactly what she was doing. She was going to give Dylan a much-needed reality check. He thought he had seduced all those girls, but Celeste had gotten a different impression from Kayla this morning. The girl had straight out offered to have sex with him this weekend. These girls were already looking for sex, and Dylan just happened to provide them with it. He didn't have superior seduction skills, only access to a lot of horny girls. The guy was in for a rude awakening if he thought it would be that easy to get into her pants. She wasn't even planning to kiss him. Celeste had never been one for PDA, and there was no reason to kiss him in private since they weren't really dating. Dylan, of course, had no problem with PDA. She had once seen him kiss 3 girls at school in one day. They weren't just brief pecks on the lips either, but passionate, open-mouthed kisses. No wonder they called it sucking face. After witnessing that, Celeste had been even more against it. She didn't want anyone watching her do that. Dylan had a different opinion, and he came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist as she was getting her backpack out of her locker after school. "Hey, girlfriend," he breathed against her neck, sending an involuntary shiver through her. It made her drop her backpack, which was fortunately still empty. "You scared me," she lied. "That's not fear, Celeste. Do you think I don't know the difference?" He spoke against her neck again, and another shiver went through her. "Stop that," she said. "You can't be doing this in public." "Doing what, Celeste? Turning you on? We can go somewhere private." His warm breath on her neck had made goosebumps pop out all over her arms. The intimate way he kept repeating her name wasn't helping the situation. She pulled his hands away from her waist, and he let her go, only to grab her shoulders and turn her around to face him. "I had no idea you'd be so responsive, Celeste. I've hardly even touched you yet." She couldn't seem to look away from his dark eyes. His voice was almost hypnotic as he said these things that shouldn't be making heat spread through her whole body. He leaned closer until she could feel his breath on her lips as he spoke.
Do you know how hot that is?
The sound of the locker door next to her being opened jolted Celeste from Dylan's spell. She pushed him away from her and saw a red-faced Melissa standing there. Sorry, she stuttered. I have to catch my bus. She began quickly stuffing books into her backpack. Celeste was too busy trying to calm her breathing to answer. Dylan's intense gaze never wavered from Celeste as he spoke to Melissa.
It's okay. We need to continue this in private anyway.
Celeste found her voice. I have a meeting. A seductive smile played over his lips.
That's what I just said.
A student council meeting, she supplied as Melissa closed her locker and hurried away. He saw right through her lie.
Now you're scared. I told you that I know the difference.
She clung to her story. No, I really do have a meeting.
Okay, Celeste. Have fun at your meeting. I'll see you tomorrow, girlfriend.
He winked at her before striding away. She waited until he was gone before she turned to pick up her backpack and take the books she needed. Her thoughts turned to wildfires and how they could flare up all of a sudden and blaze out of control. Something unexpected had happened to her with Dylan before Melissa had interrupted them. Celeste couldn't let that happen again. She had to put out the spark before it burned her. Chapter 5. It had started as a game, but now Dylan wanted Celeste. She was pretty with her baby blue eyes and blonde hair, but she wasn't what he considered a sexy blonde. Her manner was too reserved, and her clothes were too conservative. There was nothing even remotely flirty about her. That was why he had been blown away by her sexy response when he made his playful boyfriend moves on her by her locker. Who knew that she burned so hot beneath that cool exterior? It excited him to uncover this hidden part of her. In his mind, her indiscretion at the party didn't count because she'd been drunk. There had been no alcohol involved in her reaction to Dylan, and it made him hot just thinking about it. She had shivered with only the hint of his lips against her neck. If she was that responsive, then he couldn't wait to see her reaction when he really touched her. He had been considering backing out of their bet because the other girls were suddenly jealous. After this afternoon, Dylan now wanted Celeste so much that he was willing to put up with the drama from his women in order to have her. He didn't understand why they were upset. It wasn't like he had ever been faithful to any of them. They had all been happy with their arrangement until now. Kayla was still upset when she called him that evening. What makes her so damn special?
You're special to me too. You know that, he soothed.
Then how come you never called me your girlfriend? Kayla asked in a hurt voice.
You never said that you wanted to be my girlfriend.
This was exactly why he had shunned commitment. He didn't want to deal with clingy girls. That's because you said you didn't want a girlfriend. Her whiny tone irritated him. But now you're saying that Miss Goody Two-Shoes is your girlfriend. How do you think that makes me feel? Now she was talking about feelings, which was another reason that he didn't want a conventional relationship. This entire conversation was anathema to him.
Where is this jealousy coming from? You never had a problem before with me seeing other girls.
That was before you picked another girl over me. You're spending the whole weekend with her. You never did that with me. You don't even want to sleep over half the time. You just leave after we do it. She was getting more worked up as she went through her litany of his offenses.
Have I ever left you unsatisfied?
Dylan asked, trying to get her to focus on how much fun they had together. Don't you ever get lonely? She had finally managed to get to him with that plaintive tone of her voice as she asked that question. He hadn't known that she felt this way, because she was always up for a good time.
I'm not going to change, Kayla. You need to find someone else if you're looking for more than sex.
Like you found someone else? Her voice held a note of bitterness now.
This is the way it has to be for now. She won't sleep with me if I'm screwing around, he explained.
So it's still about the sex, she mused. That's the way it starts with girls like her. They're sneaky, Kayla warned him. Pretty soon, she'll have you wrapped around her finger.
You've got it wrong. I'll have her legs wrapped around me pretty soon, he said confidently.
Don't bet on it. The phrase she chose was an odd coincidence with what was going on between him and Celeste, but she didn't know that. She's already changed you, Dylan. You just don't see it yet. Her jealousy was making her read more into the situation than there was. He was glad that he had never felt strongly enough about anyone to experience the emotion himself.
I'm not going to change for anyone.
He was doing the same thing he always had, but it just might take a little longer with Celeste. Maybe not, though, because she was obviously afraid that she'd lose the bet when she told him to keep his hands to himself the next day at school.
You're the one who said to act like you're my girlfriend, he reminded her.
That doesn't mean that we have to make out in public, she said.
I agree. I'd much rather make out with you in private.
He was gratified to see her flush slightly.
You've been thinking about that too, haven't you, Celeste? About being alone with me.
Stop saying my name that way. She broke eye contact, and he saw her stiffen. He turned to look and saw Andrew walking in their direction. Dylan returned his attention to her as he stepped closer.
What way, Celeste?
He reached out to tilt her chin, and her startled eyes met his. What are you doing? Celeste asked desperately. He didn't answer, because he knew that she wouldn't stop him, not in front of her ex-boyfriend. Dylan simply leaned in and kissed her the way he almost had yesterday. To his surprise, she began to kiss him back, and even parted her lips for him after he ran his tongue over her bottom lip. She tangled her hand in his hair as his tongue played with hers. As much as he enjoyed kissing her, Dylan wished that they were alone. He wanted to know that she was responding to him and not just putting on a show for Andrew. Their kissing came to an abrupt halt as Andrew violently pulled Dylan away from Celeste.
Leave her alone! Get out of my face, man, Dylan warned.
Let go of him! Celeste angrily yanked Andrew's arm.
She doesn't want you,
Andrew said.
She's just doing this to piss me off.
Now Celeste was in Andrew's face. Why would it piss you off? You're not my boyfriend anymore, so stay the hell out of my life. She looked furious as she stared him down until he stalked off down the hall. The warning bell rang, and Celeste seemed to forget about Dylan as she started walking to her next class. He watched her until she was swallowed up by the crowd, and then he went to his class. No matter what Andrew said, he knew that she wanted him. She had kissed him with too much passion for it to be just for show. He would find out for sure when he kissed her in private this weekend. Chapter 6. Celeste didn't understand how she could be so attracted to someone she didn't care for emotionally. She had allowed Dylan to kiss her just to spite Andrew, but then she had forgotten about him until he pulled Dylan away from her. The kiss was only supposed to be them pressing their lips together, but she had gotten so into it that she had let him stick his tongue into her mouth, completely going against her own rules about PDA. If she was honest with herself, she wanted him to kiss her again. He was right that she had been thinking about what it would be like to be alone with him, although she wouldn't admit it to him. She hadn't thought that way about Andrew, even though she had felt emotionally connected to him and been hurt when he broke up with her. Andrew was exactly the kind of guy she had always imagined herself with. He was smart, responsible, and nice. Dylan was an out-of-control mess. There seemed to be a disconnect between her body and her mind where he was concerned. She knew that he was no good for her, but her body didn't care. Excitement coursed through her every time he came near her. She was still sure that her rational mind would prevail and put a stop to things before they went too far. Also, with Dylan being as sexual as he was, he would probably sleep with another girl soon. Then, Celeste would go back to her normal life and look back on this later as her slightly wild time in high school. "I heard that Andrew and Dylan got in a fight over you," Olivia said at lunch. How could she forget how much people loved to exaggerate things? "That's not true." "Who cares? Tell us about kissing him," Lily urged her eagerly. "Is he the best, like they say?" "I haven't kissed enough guys to know," Celeste said diplomatically. She had only kissed 2 guys before Dylan. "He is!" Lily squealed. "Look at how you're blushing. You didn't blush after Andrew kissed you." "Keep your voice down, please." As angry as she was at Andrew, she didn't want something like that to get back to him. Olivia was much less enthusiastic about the whole thing than Lily. "So, what else do you know about him besides that he's a good kisser?" That was actually a good question. If they had really been dating, she would have wanted to know all about him. Celeste looked away from Olivia's disapproving gaze to try to think up a good lie about him, and saw that Dylan was approaching their table. She was grateful for the distraction, because she didn't want to get caught in a lie by her friends. They were the only ones who believed her story about what happened the night of the party, and she would hate to lose their trust too.
"Hey, Celeste, I came to meet your friends."
He set his tray down and sat down next to her. Celeste made the introductions, although they already knew who he was. "We were just talking about you," Lily declared to Celeste's discomfort.
"Yeah?"
Dylan looked at Celeste.
"What did you say?"
"Not much," Olivia said in a cool tone. "Does she even know anything about you?"
"We're getting to know each other,"
he replied smoothly.
"What, exactly, do you want to know?"
Olivia looked at him in an appraising way that had nothing to do with his looks. "What do you like to do for fun?" She quirked an eyebrow, waiting for him to answer the loaded question. Instead of embarrassing Celeste further by saying something suggestive, he surprised her with his answer.
"I love music, and I'm actually in a band."
"You are?" Celeste wanted to kick herself for asking that question. That was something that his girlfriend should know. "That's so cool!" Lily broke the awkwardness of the moment. "Do you play guitar?"
"No, I sing. Jenna is actually our guitarist."
He nodded toward a nearby table. "Your guitar player is a girl? That's so cool!" You could always count on Lily for enthusiasm. Dylan caught the look Olivia shot at Celeste.
"We haven't dated. I would never take the chance of breaking up the band that way, and neither would Jenna. We're going to be in the Battle of the Bands next month."
"Cool! We're definitely going to hear you play," Lily promised. The school had an annual Battle of the Bands in addition to the talent show, and it was always popular. Celeste had never been to it, even though the student council helped to organize it. She guessed that she would attend this year, even though she and Dylan would surely break up by then.
"We're practicing in my basement on Friday night, if you want to come hear us play,"
Dylan offered. If possible, Lily's level of excitement increased even more. "I'd love to." He smiled at her and looked at Olivia.
"Will you come too? Celeste is going to be there."
This was news to Celeste, but she urged Olivia to come with them. She agreed to be there, probably because she thought Celeste needed a chaperone.
"So, what do you like to do for fun, Olivia?"
Dylan asked, turning the tables on her. She smiled grudgingly at him, and Celeste could see that Dylan would be able to thaw even Olivia if he were given enough time. She was relieved to find out that he could carry a conversation that wasn't made up of sexual innuendos. He focused his attention on people when they spoke, and listened to what they said, instead of just waiting to say what he wanted to say. Celeste realized that she had underestimated him as just a hot-looking guy. His looks were only part of his appeal. and she had to admit that his personality was involved in his seduction of all those girls. It was a pretty irresistible combination.
"What are you thinking?"
Dylan asked her later that afternoon as they walked out of school together toward the parking lot. Why did you want to meet my friends? She had been wondering about that for the rest of the school day.
"I figured that's what a boyfriend would do."
He shrugged. You've seriously never had a real girlfriend? Celeste felt a little more comfortable around him now that he hadn't tried anything by her locker after school.
"Nope,"
he answered. Why not? She was actually really curious about this.
"I just like to keep things casual. There's no drama that way."
He smiled wryly.
"At least, there wasn't until you made everybody jealous."
Me? She looked at him to see if he was serious.
"Yeah, they want to know what makes you special enough to be my girlfriend. It just proves to me that I was right. Commitment just brings drama into your life."
It wouldn't if you were only with one person, Celeste said.
"Yeah, I see how drama-free your life is,"
Dylan commented, and saw her face fall.
"Hey, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that."
She shook her head. It's okay. Not all relationships end that way, you know.
But most do. That's because monogamy isn't realistic, Celeste. There are so many interesting and attractive people in the world. How can you expect to stay with one person for an entire lifetime?
Because that's what happens when you fall in love, she answered.
Have you ever been in love?
Dylan asked. She was quiet for a moment. No, she finally admitted.
Then how do you know what it's like? How do you know it'll last?
They had reached her car, and he stood, waiting for her answer. My parents, she said. They love each other.
That's very rare. Most of the people I know are divorced.
She couldn't argue with the truth of that statement. That doesn't mean that you should just give up on ever finding love.
I've been with lots of girls, and I haven't found it yet.
Maybe you should slow down, she advised. Love takes time.
I do take my time,
he said as he stepped closer to her.
I like to give a girl lots of foreplay. It makes it so much better.
Her pulse began to race from the way he was looking at her. That's not what I meant.
Do you want to kiss me?
She was startled by the question. What?
I just saw Andrew pull out of the parking lot. He's not here to see you now. Do you want to kiss me?
He really paid attention to everything, she realized. You didn't ask me last time, she said evasively.
And?
Dylan prompted. Celeste didn't know what to say, so she just stood, looking at him. What kind of game was he playing now? He regarded her for a moment.
I'll see you tomorrow, Celeste.
Wait, she called as he turned to walk away. He came back to her.
Yes?
She wasn't sure what she wanted anymore. Nothing. See you tomorrow. Dylan moved closer to her and looked directly into her eyes. His gaze became intense with desire, and she couldn't look away. Very slowly, he began to lean toward her as her breathing became uneven in anticipation of his kiss. She felt his breath ghosting over her lips and unconsciously parted them for him. At the very last second, he moved his head to whisper into her ear.
I always take my time, Celeste.
He stepped back to look at her, and his lips curved into a sensual smile.
Maybe someday you'll let me give you a ride home.
As she watched him walk away, Celeste wasn't sure about anything anymore. Chapter 7. Dylan didn't try to kiss her again, but he was otherwise behaving like a real boyfriend.
Give me your number.
What for? Celeste asked as she opened her locker.
So I can have my girlfriend's phone number,
he said.
I wanted to call you last night, but that wasn't possible without your number.
She put away her backpack and looked at him. What did you want to talk about?
Give me your phone.
He held out his hand until she gave it to him.
I wanted to find out more about you. Olivia doesn't think that we know each other well enough to date.
He entered her number into his phone, and then he pressed more buttons on her phone before handing it back to her.
Now you have my number too.
Why do you care what Olivia thinks? Celeste wondered aloud.
Because you care what she thinks, he answered. I could tell that her opinion matters to you.
She couldn't figure him out. Why do you care what matters to me?
Because you're my girlfriend,
he said like that should be obvious. She couldn't contradict him with other people around, so she just gathered the books she needed for her classes.
What's your favorite color?
Dylan asked. Forest green, she replied.
Very decisive. I like that.
He smiled in approval. Okay, she said in wry amusement. What's your favorite color?
The same color as your eyes. Blue.
He winked at her. Now he was behaving in the manner she expected from him, and she laughed. Are you just saying that, or is blue really your favorite color? He smiled.
It actually is my favorite color, and I decided to take the opportunity to tell you what pretty eyes you have.
Why do you sound like the big bad wolf? Was she actually flirting with him now?
You've got it backwards, little girl. I've got my eyes to see you with.
He stepped closer to her and ran a finger lightly over her arm.
Hands to touch you with.
He leaned in and spoke softly.
Lips to kiss you with.
I don't remember it going like that. She held still and waited to see what he would do.
This is a much better version.
His gaze dropped to her lips, but he held back from kissing her. Is the wolf still bad? Celeste asked. His intense gaze was focused on her eyes again, watching her reaction.
Yeah, but she likes it.
He spoke the truth, Celeste thought. What had happened to her disdain for his player ways? How had he gotten under her skin in just a few days? Was she as shallow and weak as all those other girls, or was he really that good at seduction? Celeste was new to flirting, but Dylan made it easy and fun. She would have felt ridiculous saying such things to Andrew, but Dylan's spontaneity brought out her playful side. Celeste had always been a person who planned everything and set goals. She didn't like situations that she couldn't control. Yet she was living in the moment with Dylan, and it was more exciting than scary. The arrival of Melissa prompted Celeste to walk away from her locker. This all started with me trying to get you to leave her alone, and now we're always in her way.
If I can see you outside of school, I won't be forced to lurk by your locker all the time, he said.
I'm coming to your house tomorrow, she reminded him.
Not by yourself.
He had to wait for the bell to stop ringing before he could continue.
Let's go out on a date on Saturday.
Okay, she agreed. See you later.
See you later, Celeste.
When he said it, it sounded like a promise instead of a casual parting phrase. Dylan left her alone at lunch to have time with her friends. You like him, don't you? Olivia's tone of voice made it sound more like an accusation than a question. Celeste answered her with another question. Why would I be dating him if I didn't like him? Why wouldn't she like him? Lily joined in. He's just as nice as she said he was. Have you two forgotten that he slept with half the girls in this school? What is the point of dating him? Olivia demanded. Do you really think that you have a future with him? Those were all valid questions that Celeste should have been asking herself. Olivia was very similar to Celeste in personality, or at least to her attitude before she had started hanging out with Dylan. I know that it won't last, Celeste admitted, but I'm just living in the moment right now. What's wrong with having some fun? Lily defended her.
Nothing,
Olivia said, surprising Celeste.
as long as you understand that's all it is.
Celeste patted Olivia's hand. Thanks for looking out for me, but you don't have to worry. I don't expect anything serious from Dylan. With that ironed out, they settled into their usual comfortable atmosphere and began to talk about other things. Celeste was in a good mood all day, as Dylan involved her in little snippets of conversation in the hallway about her favorite movies and music. "What's your band called?" Celeste asked him after school, while they were walking toward the parking lot. She'd been sure not to linger by her locker. He grimaced.
"Addicted. It's so hard to come up with a good name that hasn't already been taken."
"Addicted is cool," she said. "I like it."
"It took us forever to agree on a name."
He smiled at her.
"Not many people have heard us play, so I'm excited for you to be there."
"We're all looking forward to it too. You'll have to give me your address, because I'm driving them to your house."
"I'll call you later and give you directions. I want you to be honest about what you think of the band," he said in earnest. "It's important to me to know the truth."
He obviously took his music very seriously. "Sure," she agreed. "I'll be honest." She grinned at him. "Olivia will be really honest."
"I noticed," he laughed. "That's exactly what we need, instead of—"
"Groupies," Celeste guessed.
"I didn't get into it for that."
She found it funny that he seemed so upset about it. "Dylan, you attract girls just walking down the hall. Did you really think you wouldn't as the hot singer of a band?" He instantly forgot that he was upset as he flashed a sexy smile at her.
"You think I'm hot?"
She pretended to smack her head. "Oh, I forgot that you wanted me to be honest. In that case, I have to tell you that you're only lukewarm," she teased. He backed her up against her car.
"What about now? Am I getting warmer?"
"Dylan," she gasped. "There are people watching us."
"What people?"
Dylan asked, as he pressed his body against hers. "You're hot," she conceded desperately in an unsteady voice. He tilted her chin as he leaned in toward her lips.
"I'm hot for you, Celeste."
She waited in torturous anticipation, but he didn't move. "I want you to kiss me," she said.
"I will."
He let go of her chin and stepped back.
"When the time is right."
He began to walk away and then turned back.
"I'll call you later, Celeste."
She stood watching him in frustration and disbelief until she became angry. Why was she letting him play her like this? She would show him that she wasn't a toy. He thought that he was so smart with his games, but she was getting wise to him. She had expected him to keep coming on strong with trying to get her into bed. Celeste had been prepared to fend off his advances, but he was varying his approach in a sneaky attempt to tempt her into losing the bet. She resolved not to fall for his tricks again. When he called her that evening, she talked to him the way she did with her friends, without any flirting. Celeste wrote down the directions to his house. She wanted to know where he had found groupies, but found a roundabout way to ask. "Has your band played out anywhere?"
"Yeah, at this one coffee shop. They have poetry readings, too."
"You found groupies at a coffee shop?" She hadn't been able to hold that back.
"It was bizarre," he agreed. "The first time we played there, it was what you would expect for a place like that. Then we got a call saying they wanted us back, and that time it was crazy. The girls that were there the first time must have brought all their friends, because the place was packed."
"That's good, right?" Celeste asked. "Isn't that how you build your fan base? By word of mouth?"
"Yeah, that's the idea."
He still sounded dissatisfied.
"Anyway, we can't play bars yet, so we're hoping to get some gigs at festivals and things like that."
"You have to start somewhere," Celeste said, thinking that he was frustrated by his options.
"We just have to keep working on getting better."
He sounded so passionate about his music. Then he changed the subject back to her in his quest to learn more about her.
"What do you like to do, Celeste?"
Her interests sounded so boring compared to being in a band, but she reminded herself that she wasn't trying to impress him. She remembered how he had messed with her mind and decided to talk his ear off about her quiet hobbies. Celeste loved to organize and decorate the house. She often rearranged things around to refresh the look of a room. Gardening was also enjoyable to her, and she had quite a green thumb. Dylan didn't interrupt her while she was talking, and she wondered if she had put him to sleep.
"Are you going to be an interior designer?"
Dylan asked when she finally wound down. "I don't know yet, but I'm thinking about it." She was surprised that he didn't sound bored.
"You should do it,"
he urged.
"You sound like you have a real passion for it."
She was startled by that statement, since she had been thinking exactly the same thing about him with his music. Celeste just couldn't seem to figure him out. Was this all part of his seduction? Did he pretend to care about her interests only to make her like him more? Was this how he approached the other girls too? She repeated to herself that she wasn't going to fall for it. "Well, I need to get ready for bed." Her voice was slightly cool now.
"Sounds interesting."
How could he make only 2 words sound so suggestive? "Good night, Dylan," she said firmly.
"It would be if you were here with me. Oh, I still need your address."
Why? They hadn't discussed anything about him coming over.
"So that I can know where my girlfriend lives."
"You don't have to keep calling me that," she informed him. "Nobody can hear you now anyway."
"You can hear me, and that's what you are. My girlfriend. Now give me your address."
She told him before she continued the conversation. "You know that's a lie. I'm not really your girlfriend."
"The lie becomes the truth," he said. "We're going out, and we're attracted to each other. How are you not my girlfriend?"
"But I thought—" Celeste was confounded by the turn their conversation had taken. "I mean, this whole thing is a bet."
"I don't give a damn about that bet anymore. I want you, Celeste. If the only way to have you is for you to be my girlfriend, then that's what you are."
Which would conveniently still make you the winner of the bet. "Stop playing your mind games, Dylan. They're not going to work on me. I'm not going to jump into bed with you just because you call me your girlfriend."
"I'll lose the stupid bet tonight if you want. Jennifer called me right before I called you, and she wants to sneak me into her room. Should I go over there, Celeste? Is that what you want?"
"No!" She startled both of them with her vehemence.
"Let's call off the bet, Celeste."
There was something different in his voice now, something she couldn't identify. It made a slight shiver of excitement run through her, and she was glad that he couldn't see her. "I'm still not going to sleep with you."
"I'll take that as a yes, to calling off the bet."
She could almost see his sexy smile. "Okay," she agreed.
"You know what, Celeste? It is a good night. Sweet dreams, girlfriend."
She didn't know how to feel when she hung up the phone. Every time she thought she had figured him out, he turned the tables on her. Celeste was even more nonplussed the next morning when Dylan showed up in her driveway before school. She had just set her backpack down in her car when he came roaring up on his motorcycle.
"Do you want a ride?"
Dylan asked after he took off his helmet. She stared at him. Dylan was hot, but Dylan on a motorcycle was scorching hot. "What are you doing here?" She glanced behind her, but her parents weren't anywhere in sight.
"It's the right time to kiss you."
He swung his leg over and got off the bike. "Too bad," she scoffed. "You missed your chance." The look in her eyes must have given her away, because he wasn't deterred.
"I want to take a picture of you on my bike."
He pulled out his cell phone. She couldn't resist this offer, because the motorcycle looked so cool. "Send it to my phone so I can have it too." Celeste carefully mounted the bike and smiled for Dylan. He took a couple of pictures and advanced on her before she could get off the bike.
You look sexy like that.
There was no teasing this time as he captured her mouth in a hungry kiss. "Celeste!" her mother called from the front door. "Who is that?" Dylan helped her off the bike and walked with her to meet her mother. "This is my boyfriend, Dylan," she introduced him.
It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Winters.
Dylan smiled at her mom. "We have to get to school," Celeste said. "You're not going on the motorcycle, are you?" Her mom sounded worried. "No, he just stopped by to say hi." Celeste kept her voice as casual as she could, considering her mom had just caught her locking lips with Dylan. "Oh, I want to get a picture of you on the bike," she said to him. He obliged and then told her he'd see her at school.
Bye, Mrs. Winters.
"Bye." Her mom waved to him and looked like she wanted to talk to Celeste. "I've got to get to school. See you later, Mom." She quickly got into her car and drove away. Celeste would have to deal with her parents later, but right now she was too high on Dylan's kiss to worry about anything. She turned on the radio and sang along to an upbeat love song. It made her think about seeing Dylan's band tonight. She was really doing this. Dylan was really her boyfriend. "What's going on with you?" Olivia asked her at lunch. "Why do you look so happy?" "It's Friday," Celeste announced unnecessarily. "Yay, Friday!" Lily cheered. "I can't wait for tonight." "Speaking of that," Olivia said, "are you going to tell your parents about Dylan?" "Already did," Celeste informed her. She related the story about that morning, minus the kiss. Olivia finally cracked a smile. "I bet he made a great impression on your mom when he showed up on his motorcycle." "I got pictures," Celeste showed them. "He looks extra hot on the motorcycle," Lily said, echoing Celeste's thoughts. "Did you ride on it?" Olivia was looking at the photo of Celeste on the bike. "No, he just took my picture on it." Celeste thought she looked out of place because she was wearing slacks and a blouse instead of jeans and a t-shirt like Dylan. She and Dylan didn't belong together, but she couldn't make herself stay away from him. He again walked her to her car after school, and he kissed her. It was more controlled than the kiss they had shared that morning, but it hinted at more to come.
"I'll see you tonight,"
Dylan said. "Tonight," she confirmed. Her parents were okay with it once they heard that her friends were going with her. She answered their questions about Dylan, and she was glad that they weren't aware of his reputation at school. Celeste wore jeans and a t-shirt to Dylan's house, because she figured that's what everyone else would be wearing. She was correct in her assumption, but Dylan had changed out of the casual clothes he had worn to school and into equally casual clothes. He must have recently taken a shower, because she could smell the clean scent of soap when he leaned in to give her a peck on the lips. After all the introductions were made, the band started to practice playing songs. Celeste recognized all of them except one. She had hoped that Dylan was an okay singer because he had asked her to be honest, and she didn't want to say anything negative. His performance rendered her speechless as she sat, transfixed by his voice. It was the voice of a star, and that would have been an unbeatable combination with his gorgeous looks. Dylan, however, also had a magnetic stage presence. Celeste could understand why the coffee shop had been packed with groupies for an unknown band. The rest of the band was good, but the singer was incredible. "He's a fucking rock star," Olivia said. Celeste and Lily stared at her. They rarely heard Olivia use such language. She didn't swear unless she meant it. Lily recovered first. "Yeah, Celeste, your boyfriend's gonna be famous. How cool is that?" Olivia looked at Lily like she was stupid. This is just going to make everything worse for Celeste. She cut off Lily's protest and spoke directly to Celeste. "You should get out now, before it's too late." Chapter 8. Celeste knew that Olivia was right, She was starting to like Dylan more with each passing day. Now that they had called off the bet, she didn't know why she was still continuing to see him. She didn't know what was really going on between them, but she knew that it was happening too fast. After her reaction last night, she knew that she didn't want him to sleep with other girls. That must mean that she had already developed feelings for him, so she feared that she was getting in too deep. How would she handle it when he gave into temptation and went back to his player ways? He had told her himself that he had attracted groupies, and he was likely to have more of them once more girls saw him perform. She already knew that she had no future with him, so why put off the inevitable? It would be better for the relationship to end sooner rather than later. Even though it had been less than a week since she started hanging out with Dylan, she would miss him if they parted ways. Yet it would be the rational thing to do, since she was too attracted to him to try to be just friends. The problem was that she didn't want to stop seeing him. She had been foolish enough to think that she could easily resist him, but now she liked having his attention. "I'll think about it," Celeste said to Olivia. She turned her attention back to the band because she didn't want Olivia to figure out that it was already too late. Addicted was comprised of 4 people. Dylan was the singer, and Jenna played guitar. Celeste recognized Alex, a boy in her math class, as the drummer. There was also another guitar player in the band. She had seen him at school, but she had forgotten his name. She should have used Dylan's trick of repeating the name when she was introduced to him. Her attention was drawn back to Dylan as he began to sing a song she didn't recognize. She was surprised that she had never heard it before, because it rocked. The beat matched the sexy lyrics perfectly, as it was a song about intense physical attraction. Dylan looked and sounded so hot while he sang it that Celeste felt her face flame with heat when he looked at her. "He is so fucking hot," Lily said, forgetting her shock from a few minutes ago when Olivia swore. "I think that's precisely the problem," Olivia commented. Celeste wanted to cover her face with her hands, but that would just draw more attention to her embarrassment. Why did Dylan have to be so sexual? That was the last song they played, so she was still flushed from that arousing performance when he came over to talk to them.
"What did you think?"
"That was amazing," Lily exclaimed. "Who sings that song you just played? I really like it." He beamed with pleasure at her compliment.
"Jenna and I actually wrote that one."
"You wrote that song?" Celeste asked in disbelief. "It's so good." If possible, his smile became even more radiant.
"Thanks."
He turned back and called out Jenna's name.
"It's a hit."
She came over to talk to them. "Dylan wrote the lyrics and I wrote the music." "You're very talented," Olivia said. Dylan looked at her in surprise, and he sounded very serious when he spoke.
"That means a lot coming from you. I hear you're a tough audience."
Olivia was equally serious. "I tell it like it is." Dylan became quiet with the weight of his thoughts, while the rest of the band talked with them. The other guitar player was Danny, and he played bass, while Jenna played lead guitar. They laughed when Lily told them that they were going to win the Battle of the Bands, but Celeste could tell that they were pleased by her enthusiasm.
"You haven't even heard the other bands yet,"
Alex said. "That's true, but I just know that you'll win," Lily said. Alex smiled at her.
"I'm glad that we have your vote."
Celeste thought that he sounded a little flirty, and his eyes seemed to linger on Lily more than on anyone else. She seemed to be sneaking glances at him, too. Celeste wondered if he was going to ask her out. She saw Lily walk casually over to inspect the drum set, and Alex followed her. He began to say something to her, and Celeste turned away from them so she wouldn't feel like she was spying. Dylan met her gaze, and he seemed amused by this turn of events. Olivia had been talking to Jenna, but now she approached Celeste. "Are you ready to go?" Celeste remembered that she was driving her friends home. "Yeah, whenever Lily is ready." She glanced toward the drum set and saw that Alex was still talking to Lily. Olivia couldn't contain her smile. "I'll go get her."
"Why don't you come back after you drop them off?"
Dylan suggested. Celeste wasn't sure if being alone with him was such a good idea. She had yet to be introduced to a parent. "I think I'd better go home. Thanks for inviting us to hear you sing. You're so much better than I expected you to be," she admitted.
"You really think so?"
He seemed almost shy when he asked her that question. Some of the awe she had felt when she heard him sing was in her voice. "The way you sing is just so..." No word seemed adequate to describe it. "And writing your own song? I really think you have a future in music." She had seen his flirty, playful looks and his sexy, lustful looks. She had seen him look amused or serious, but she hadn't seen him look at her the way he was now. His dark eyes were intense, with some unknown emotion. "Thanks for inviting us," Lily said.
"Yeah, you're welcome to come any time. Right, Dylan?"
Alex asked. Dylan broke eye contact with Celeste.
"Yeah, we practice almost every Friday. Sometimes on Sunday, too."
Olivia also thanked them for the invite, and they said their goodbyes. Alex gave Lily a lingering look.
"See you at school."
She smiled at him. "Yeah, enjoy your weekend." He smiled back at her.
"You too."
Everybody else exchanged amused glances because the two of them were so cute and obvious. Celeste was sure that it wouldn't be long before Alex and Lily started dating. Lily was unusually quiet during the ride home, but she hummed along to the songs on the radio. Celeste dropped her off first because Olivia's house was closer to her own. "Are you going back?" Olivia asked. "Not tonight. We're going out to a movie tomorrow," Celeste said. "Okay. I'm not going to keep acting like your mother. You know why I'm worried about this, but it's not my decision." She laughed. "I hope we don't have to worry about Lily now." Celeste smiled. "I guess love is in the air." There was a heavy silence in the car. "That's just an expression," Celeste said nervously. "Yeah," Olivia agreed, but Celeste could feel her eyes on her as she drove. The awkwardness didn't go away, and Celeste was relieved when they arrived at Olivia's house. She was glad to be left alone with her thoughts, even though nothing was likely to be resolved in her mind. Dylan had parked his motorcycle on the street, a few houses down from her house, and he was standing next to it. She parked behind him and got out of her car, because the last thing she needed was to be caught with him in her driveway again. "What are you doing here?" Celeste asked, even though she was excited to see him.
"I wanted to say goodnight to you."
He came to stand in front of her. "You already said goodnight to me," she said. He stepped closer to her.
"Not the way I wanted to."
"Not in the way I wanted to either," she said, surprising herself. His hand came up to caress her cheek.
"What you said tonight. No girl has ever said something like that to me, Celeste."
She couldn't see the expression on his face very clearly because she had chosen to park away from the streetlight. There was an intensity in his voice, although his touch was tender. "You mean about your singing? Didn't the girls in the coffee shop tell you what a great singer you are?"
"They told me how sexy I am. That's all girls ever say to me."
"I wonder why," she said with a smile. "Anyway, Olivia told you that you're talented."
"Yeah, but Olivia's not hot for me. It's nice to hear something like that from a girl who's attracted to me."
"You sure come on all sexy for a guy who wants girls to like him for more than his body. I hate to break it to you, but Olivia thinks you're hot too," Celeste informed him.
"But she's not hot for me. There's a difference."
This intrigued her. "How do you know?"
"I can always tell. Anyway, she's hot for someone else," Dylan said.
"What?" Olivia had never shown an interest in any guy as far as Celeste could tell. "Who?"
"Can we talk about this another time? I came here to see you."
His hand slid down to her chin. "You see with your eyes," Celeste said, but she was already tilting her head for his kiss. Some of the tenderness carried over into the kiss, but it was soon replaced by passion. His body was pressed against hers as she leaned against the car, and she tangled her hand in his sexy rock star hair. The kisses were intoxicating, and she only put a stop to them when she felt his hand cup her breast. That was when she remembered that they were on the street, and anybody could come by and see them. She turned her head when he tried to recapture her mouth with his own. "I have to go home."
"I know."
He nuzzled her neck. "Don't give me a hickey." She pushed against his chest.
"That's not what I want to give you,"
he said as he stepped back.
"You should have come back to my house."
"Not after I heard that song you wrote. I felt like you were singing it to me." She didn't have to imagine the reaction if he had sung it in the coffee shop.
"I was singing it to you. Did it turn you on, Celeste?"
His voice was so sexy that she should have known he'd be a sexy singer, too. "Do you have a recording of it?"
"Here with you? Yeah, we have a demo."
She knew that she shouldn't ask, but she wanted it. "Could you make me a copy? I promise I won't give it to anyone else."
"You liked it that much? I'll give you a copy if you tell me why you like it."
He was playing his seduction games again. "I'm not supposed to tell you how sexy you are. Isn't that right, Dylan?" She was flirting with him, and he knew it.
"I'll make an exception for my girlfriend."
Hearing him call her that gave her a little thrill. "I like it because it describes how I feel about you." Her heart was pounding in her ears when she finished speaking. He was silent for a long moment.
"You were right not to come back to my house, Celeste,"
he said in a rough voice that was even sexier than before. Then he pulled her into a hot kiss that left her breathless. He opened the car door for her after he let her go.
"I'll give you the copy tomorrow. Thanks for being there tonight."
"Thanks for having me," she said as she sat down in the car. His laugh was just as sexy as everything else about him.
"I'm still looking forward to that, Celeste."
Did she have to watch every single thing she said to him? What did it matter after what she had admitted to him? "Good night, Dylan."
"Yes, it was, Celeste. It was a very good night."
He shut the door for her and watched her drive down the street and into her driveway. She got out of the car and turned to see him take off on his motorcycle. Yes, she thought. It was already too late for her to get out of whatever trouble she was getting herself into with Dylan. Chapter 9. Celeste was relieved that Dylan came to pick her up in a car. She had overheard her parents arguing about him, and she didn't need to add the danger of a motorcycle to their list of reasons about why Dylan wasn't a suitable boyfriend for her. After Andrew, who appeared to be a perfect boyfriend for their daughter, Dylan was much too casual and hot. Her dad wanted to forbid her from seeing him. "You can't stop her from growing up," her mom said.
"No,"
her dad agreed.
"but I can slow it down as much as possible."
"You'll just make him more attractive to her by trying to keep her from him. She'll sneak around and see him behind our backs. It's better to let it run its course," her mom advised. "She'll see for herself that he's not right for her." Celeste already knew that, but it didn't stop her from going out with him. She was drawn to him like a moth to a flame. He came into her house this time so that he could be properly introduced to her dad. Dylan was polite and said all the right things, but he looked too much like what he was, a boy who was out to seduce his daughter, for her dad to be able to trust him. He stood helplessly watching them as they left in Dylan's car.
"Your dad doesn't like me,"
Dylan stated. "That's not true," Celeste lied.
"It's okay. I'm used to it. No dad ever likes me. All that matters is that you like me, Celeste."
He glanced over and smiled at her. "I haven't decided yet," she teased.
Then I'll have to convince you,
he said, already beginning to flirt with her. To keep her thoughts from turning to how he might convince her, she returned to their conversation from last night. So, who is this guy you said that Olivia likes? I asked her if she has a crush on anyone and she said no.
I'm not surprised she doesn't want to tell you, he replied. I probably shouldn't have said anything about it.
Celeste was really curious now. Why? Who is it?
Never mind. It's better to leave it alone.
No, she protested. You can't leave me hanging like that. I won't be able to concentrate on the movie. Please tell me.
It's Andrew,
Dylan said. Andrew who? Celeste asked.
Your ex-boyfriend, Andrew.
He glanced over at her to see her reaction. Celeste laughed heartily. That's ridiculous. Olivia would never do that.
She didn't do anything,
he corrected her.
She just has a thing for him. I noticed it freshman year when I saw her looking at him. She would always look away when he looked in her direction. I didn't have any classes with them last year, but they're both in my science class this year. Nothing has changed. She's still into him, but he doesn't know it.
Freshman year? But that was before we even started going out. She never said anything to me about it, Celeste fretted. Are you sure about this?
Yeah, it's pretty obvious.
Celeste was convinced that Dylan was wrong. She had never noticed any signs that Olivia had a crush on Andrew. They were all in student government and worked together organizing school events. Olivia was always focused on what needed to be done instead of using it as an excuse to socialize. Dylan thought that he was an expert on girls, but he was way off the mark on this one. Celeste decided that his absurd notion wasn't worth dwelling on and brought her thoughts back to the current situation as they arrived at the movie theater. Unlike most guys, Dylan chose to take her to a romantic movie instead of something full of explosions and car chases. They shared popcorn, but he didn't try to touch her during the movie. He simply allowed the story to set the mood. Celeste was very aware of him beside her during the kissing scenes. The actors had good chemistry, and the sexual tension between them sizzled. She was in a heightened state of anticipation as they walked out to the parking lot after the movie. Dylan pulled her into a kiss as they reached his car. Her lips were still tingling as she buckled her seatbelt. I didn't know you had a car too, she said to break the tension.
Yeah, my dad bought it for me.
He turned on the car and pulled out of the parking spot.
I bought the bike with my own money.
Do you have a job? Celeste asked.
More than one, he said. I work on a crew painting houses in the summer, and I work at a hardware store part-time, mostly stocking shelves.
She would have to tell her parents that so they could see that he was responsible. Painting houses? That sounds like hard work.
It is. My dad's friend owns the company. He wanted me to get out there and find out what it's like to make a living. My dad works in construction, and he's not too happy that I don't want to go to college.
You don't want to go to college? This was a foreign concept to Celeste. She thought everybody was planning on college.
I want to give music a shot first. If I don't make it, then I'll look into doing something else, he explained.
What does your mom think about that? Celeste knew that her parents would freak out if she decided not to go to college.
She believes in going after your dream, so she supports my decision. She was a model during her teens. It only lasted a few years and she never hit it big, but she says she's glad that she tried. Otherwise, she would have always wondered about it,
Dylan said. Your parents sound like opposite personalities, she remarked.
Yeah, they are. Maybe that's why they split up. It got to the point where they couldn't agree on anything. Dad lives in Arizona now, and they actually get along better now that they're not living together anymore. He's still trying to change my mind about college, though.
Celeste was glad that her parents were still together. So you live with your mom, she surmised.
Yeah, she's working right now. Mom works as a bartender on the weekends. That's why it's easier to practice at my house, because we're not bothering anybody. Alex even keeps his drum set there.
That explained why no parents had been around the previous evening, Celeste thought. You said she does that on the weekends. What does she do during the week?
She's a waitress. She makes good tips at her job, but we wouldn't be able to afford to live in our house if it hadn't already been paid off before my parents divorced,
Dylan said. That's probably why your dad wants you to go to college. He wants you to be able to afford nice things. She realized that this sounded like a lecture, but she was used to speaking her mind. Dylan didn't seem to be offended.
Yeah, he says he wants me to have it easier than he did. Construction is hard work, and he wants me to be in an air-conditioned office. I don't know about that, though. I think I'd be bored out of my mind.
She couldn't picture him in an office either. Well, what else do you think you might want to do besides music?
There's really nothing else that I want to do. I guess I'll find something else if I have to,
he said doubtfully. Where are we going? Celeste hadn't been paying attention to her surroundings during their conversation, but she now noticed that they weren't in her neighborhood.
To my house, he told her.
Dylan,
don't trust yourself to be alone with me.
There was a challenging note in his voice. Yes, thought Celeste. It's not that. I think my parents want me home.
I didn't hear them give you a curfew. I'm pretty sure your dad would have told me a specific time if you had a curfew.
I don't have a curfew, she admitted. He pulled into his driveway but left the car running.
I'll take you home, if that's what you want. I was hoping to spend a little more time with you, but I'm not going to force you to hang out with me.
She knew it was a bad idea, but she didn't want to go home yet. I'll come in for a little while, but I can't stay long.
Okay.
He smiled at her and turned off the car. Celeste was beginning to feel extremely nervous as they entered the silent house. Dylan turned on the lights and offered her something to drink. He put on some music as she sat down on the couch and took a sip of her soda. Then he sat down beside her as she set her glass down on the coffee table. The conversation had flowed easily in the car, but now her mind seemed to have gone blank. Dylan gazed at her wordlessly before leaning in to kiss her. She responded by placing her hands on the back of his neck to pull him closer. The arousal she had felt while watching the movie with Dylan intensified as he deepened the kiss. The truth was that she had never completely calmed down after watching his sexy performance last night and having that hot encounter with him on her street afterwards. Now they were completely alone, and she didn't have to worry about anyone seeing them. Celeste forgot her caution as she kissed Dylan with growing passion. She was so into it that she didn't realize he had bypassed the usual progression of seduction until she felt his hand inside her pants. "Dylan," she gasped, but he had already slipped his hand inside her panties and found a spot she never knew existed. Celeste had never allowed anyone to touch her this way, but she couldn't seem to find the strength to stop him. She wasn't sure if she could have moved from this spot if the house had been on fire. Something powerful was building within her as Dylan stroked that special spot with his finger. She moaned with the pleasure of his touch, and then cried out as it culminated in a climax so intense that it made her whole body shudder.
"You came so fast," he said, his voice rough, low, and heated with desire. She was mortified as she pulled away from him.
"I didn't mean to go that far." He watched her cover her face with her hands.
"Hey, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. Didn't anybody ever get you off before?"
"No," she said from behind her hands, still hiding from him in shame.
"Wow."
He shook his head at the incompetence of her past lovers.
"Okay, listen to me, Celeste. You have no idea how hot that was for me. Celeste, please look at me."
She removed her hands from her face, but she refused to meet his gaze. "I want to go home."
"Okay, just give me a minute."
He stood up and took off for the bathroom. When he returned, she had composed herself somewhat, but she was still upset. He locked the door behind them as they left his house and walked to the car in silence. She was glad that he didn't try to talk to her on the way to her house, because she couldn't deal with that right now. He attempted to kiss her goodnight after he pulled into her driveway, but she turned her head away. "This has to stop," she said. "I can't see you anymore."
"Celeste,"
he protested, but she sprinted from the car before he could stop her. She took a breath to calm herself and hurried into the house to face her parents. Dylan was left with no choice but to go home. Celeste managed to make it through a brief chat with her parents before she claimed to be tired. She escaped to her room with her thoughts in a tumultuous mess. Chapter 10. Celeste found herself talking to Olivia, of all people, about what had happened with Dylan. She didn't go into details, but only said that things had gone further than she had planned. "You had sex with him?" Olivia asked in a whisper, even though they were alone at her house. "No, it didn't go that far, at least. I just can't believe how fast everything is happening. We've been together less than a week," Celeste said in despair. "You can't help how you feel about him," Olivia sympathized. "Like you can't help how you feel about Andrew?" Celeste had thrown out the words carelessly, with the expectation that Olivia wouldn't know what she was talking about, but the effect they had on her was anything but minimal. Her face drained of color as she stared at Celeste with haunted eyes. What do you mean?" Celeste was dumbfounded. "It's true? You like him?" Olivia laughed unconvincingly. "Of course I like your boyfriend. I mean, I did before he was such an ass to you." Celeste felt sick. "You've liked him all this time, since freshman year at least. Why didn't you tell me?" Olivia went on the defensive. "Where did you get an idea like that? Why are you attacking me?" "I'm not attacking you. Dylan noticed it, but I didn't believe it. Why didn't you tell me that you liked him, Olivia? I would never have gone out with him if I knew that." Olivia dropped all pretense. "Because it didn't matter. He picked you, not me. Telling you how I felt wouldn't have changed that. He doesn't like me that way." Celeste was heartbroken for her friend. It must have been like a knife in the heart for her every time she saw her with Andrew. "I still wouldn't have gone out with him. I wouldn't have put you through that." "I know. That's why I didn't say anything. I thought that it would help me get over him. When I saw the truth staring me in the face every day, that it would finally sink in that he would never return my feelings." She sighed sadly. "But you still like him," Celeste said. "I don't want to. I'm tired of feeling this way." She sighed again. "You should talk to him," Celeste encouraged. "Maybe if he knew how you feel—" "No," Olivia said firmly. "It would be completely pointless and pathetic. I don't want him to feel sorry for me. I would hate that more than anything." Celeste understood that, because that was exactly how she would feel too. She and Olivia were very much alike, which was why she had come to her to talk about her problem with Dylan. She wanted Olivia to help her make the rational decision. "I'm sorry, Olivia." She pulled her friend into a heartfelt hug. "It's nobody's fault," Olivia said as she hugged her back. She smiled ruefully after the embrace ended. "Now, about the problem you're having." "Had," Celeste corrected. "I told him I don't want to see him anymore." "So you lied," Olivia surmised. "Yeah," Celeste admitted. "What am I going to do? You warned me not to get involved with him, but I didn't listen. I can't stop thinking about him, Olivia." "You can't control your thoughts. You just need to control your actions," she advised. "Stay strong against him until he gives up." By the time she left Olivia's house, Celeste was determined to go back to the way her life had been before she got close to Dylan. He left her alone that day, but he was waiting by her locker Monday morning. His eyes lingered on her intimately, and her mind flashed back to how he had touched her Saturday night. Heat suffused her entire body at the sensual memory. She tried to take a calming breath, but she expelled it shakily.
I brought you the song you wanted.
He held out the CD to her. That's okay. She ignored his extended hand. Melissa approached her locker, and Celeste had to move closer to Dylan to get out of her way. He trapped her with his intense gaze.
I know you want it, Celeste.
The double meaning of his words was not lost on Celeste as she heard Melissa's shocked gasp. Flushing deeply with embarrassment and something else, she tried to save face by grabbing the CD out of his hand. Thanks. It's a good song. The expression on his face was blatantly sexual.
There's more where that came from. Lots more.
He walked away, and she turned to catch Melissa looking as embarrassed as Celeste felt. He's in a band, she explained hastily. Melissa managed a half-smile before turning back to her locker. Celeste opened her own locker and shoved the CD into her backpack with a vow not to listen to it. This was going to be much more difficult than she had anticipated. Her shame was starting to be replaced by desire for Dylan. She had thought that she was stronger than the other girls he had seduced. Now, she knew that she had never had to deal with temptation before. Staying in control of herself was going to take constant vigilance. Chapter 11. Dylan was thinking about Celeste as he wrote a new song. It was usually a slow process to get the lyrics just right. He would go through countless rough drafts before he was satisfied with the final result. Many of his attempts were discarded in frustration, left half-completed in a notebook, until some possible future time when he might be inspired to finish them. This new song, though, took hold of him like a fever dream. He wrote it within minutes, without changing a word. Hot damn, Dylan, what is this girl doing to you? Jenna's reaction surprised him. Being the only girl in their band, she was used to the way guys talked about sex. She hadn't batted an eyelash when she had read the lyrics to his other suggestive song.
It's what I did to her,
he said with a confident smirk. I don't think so, Jenna said. Read it again. It's all about her. I could hear the music while I was reading it through, but you know we can't play this at school. Even the people who don't get what it's really about will think you're singing about drugs.
I know that, but I think we should practice it anyway. We can play it at our next gig.
Jenna gave him a sly look. You mean you want to play it for Celeste? What's wrong, Dylan? Did Celeste cut you off? You've never had to use a song to seduce a girl before.
You don't even know what you're talking about,
he complained irritably. Jenna clapped her hands in delight. With her short brown hair and the impish look in her brown eyes, she looked like a mischievous pixie. Celeste rules the school, and she rules the lovesick fool.
How old are you?
Dylan demanded. She was undeterred by his annoyance. Ooh, you've got it bad, she sang with glee. He scowled at her.
Just write the damn music.
Only to himself would he admit that he was spending an inordinate amount of time thinking about Celeste. It wasn't like him to fantasize about one girl so much. He had a great time with girls, but he didn't dwell on the details afterwards. There were always new experiences to look forward to. This was different, because he couldn't seem to get what had happened with Celeste out of his mind. He kept remembering how she had responded to him. Girls often came to him primed for sex, but it hadn't been that way with Celeste. He had done that to her. He had succeeded in coaxing a response out of her that no other guy ever had before. It filled him with male pride, but it also left him wanting more. No girl had ever been that hot for him and then turned around and said that she didn't want to see him again. So yeah, he was going to use the song and everything else he could think of in order to seduce her. He was still turning down offers from other girls because he was too focused on having Celeste. No other girl had the same appeal to him at the moment. Celeste was having a similar problem trying not to think about Dylan. Why did she have to feel this way about him? Why couldn't she have been this hot for her real boyfriend? She never would have went to that party if Andrew hadn't called her boring. It had been said in a fit of anger, and he had apologized later, but the damage had been done. She had been determined to show everyone that she could loosen up and have fun. Her big mistake had been going to the party alone. She was going to surprise Andrew by showing up wearing the kind of clothes he'd never seen her wear before, but he wasn't even there to see her. He never texted her to tell her that his plans had changed unexpectedly, because she had said that she couldn't go with him to the party due to family plans. It wouldn't have mattered anyway, because she had forgotten her phone at home. Somebody had handed her a drink shortly after her arrival at the party. She had forgotten all about looking for Andrew after a couple more drinks, while she mingled with people she didn't usually hang out with. Popular guys were flirting with her, and the alcohol gave her the courage to flirt back. It was fun, until one of them tried to take it further than flirting. He had cornered her in a hallway, and he was trying to grope her while she protested that she had a boyfriend. Tommy, a guy from the basketball team, had come to her rescue. He made the other guy leave her alone, and he brought her more drinks and made her laugh with his funny jokes. At some point, they escaped the crowd and sat sipping their drinks in companionable silence. They woke up in bed together the next morning, fully clothed and feeling awful after their night of drinking. They ran into Madison and Jake when they went into the kitchen needing to drink some water, which was the only thing they could now stomach. Madison smirked at them. "Well, looks like we all had a good time last night," Madison said. "Ugh," Celeste moaned as she put a hand to her forehead. "Remind me never to drink again." Tommy knew what Madison was implying.
"Not us. We just passed out."
"Don't worry." Madison winked at them. "Your secret's safe with us."
"Madison."
Tommy's voice was stern.
"Nothing happened."
She smiled and turned her attention to Jake. Celeste couldn't wait to go home and change out of her uncomfortably tight clothes. Tommy was in a hurry to leave Madison's house, too.
"This is bad,"
he informed Celeste. "Yeah," she agreed. "My parents are going to ground me for the rest of my life."
"I mean Madison. She'll be on the phone as soon as Jake leaves. Everybody at school will know about this by Monday. She's a horrible gossip. I'll try to do as much damage control as I can, but be prepared for things to get ugly."
No matter how much she and Tommy denied it, pretty much everybody at school believed that they'd had sex that night. The worst part was that Andrew dismissed her explanation as a lie. She had been outraged that he thought she would have a one-night stand, but wasn't what had happened with Dylan just as bad? Even more shameful was the fact that she wanted to do it again. She wanted to be alone with Dylan and have him touch her again. Every day at school, she did her best to ignore him, but she listened to his damn song every night. She needed to destroy that CD, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. Now here she was at his house again, having given in to Lily's pleading to go with her and watch the band practice again. Alex had asked her out, but they hadn't gone out on their date yet, and Lily didn't want to go watch him alone. So, Celeste and Olivia had been roped into going with her. It was the same, like last time, except that Celeste was dreading when they would play Here With You.
"We'd like to play a brand new song for you tonight,"
Dylan said.
"It's called Ecstasy."
It began with the moan of the guitar. Then, Dylan's voice transported Celeste back to that night when he had made her lose control. The drums seemed to keep tempo with her heartbeat as Dylan sang directly to her. The rest of the world fell away as they stared at each other with the intensity of the shared memory. Her pulse was still racing when the song ended. Lily exclaimed that it was the sexiest song ever, while Olivia commented that they couldn't possibly play that at the Battle of the Bands. Celeste was glad that nobody asked for her opinion on the song. Finally, it was time to go home. Olivia sat in the car while Lily said goodbye to Alex. Dylan followed Celeste outside and stopped her before she could get to the car.
"I'm so glad you came, Celeste."
She blushed furiously at the obvious innuendo of those words. "I'm not." She snapped and hurried away to the car. He was standing in her driveway when she arrived home. "You can't be here. My parents—"
"They're not here. I knocked and nobody answered."
He walked right up into her personal space. Her voice was shaky with nervousness. "Dylan, you can't—" He cut her off again.
"What? I can't kiss my girlfriend?"
He reached out and caressed her chin with his thumb. "Dylan," she said helplessly. Her breath hitched as he brought his mouth down on hers. She had missed him, missed the way he made her feel, and her arms snaked around his neck to pull him closer. His voice was low and sexy when he broke the kiss.
"Invite me in."
He followed her to the door and waited as she unlocked it. Knowing that she was lost, but unable to fight the temptation anymore, she spoke the words without looking at him. "Come in, Dylan." Chapter 12. Their kisses were so passionate that Celeste was surprised when Dylan didn't try to take it further.
"I should go. I don't want your parents to catch me here."
"Oh, I thought—" Celeste trailed off in embarrassment after almost revealing what had been on her mind.
"I just wanted you to know that you don't have to be afraid of me, Celeste."
He held her hand as they walked to the door. "I'm not afraid of you," she told him. "I'm afraid of what's happening between us. It's moving too fast."
"Is that what the problem is? You think it has to go by some kind of time schedule?"
Dylan questioned as they stepped outside. "We've barely even started dating, and we're already—" She didn't even know how to put into words what they had done. He continued to hold her hand as they walked down the driveway.
"You're wrong if you think all I want is a one-night stand. I want to be with you, Celeste, and I think you want to be with me too."
She didn't bother denying it. "But we're not in love or anything."
"Society has fed you a line of bullshit that you have to be in love to enjoy sex. It's just not true."
Fortunately, there was nobody on the sidewalk to hear their conversation as they walked to where he had parked his car. "It's wrong," she said.
"Did it feel wrong?"
She was glad for the cover of darkness, because she felt like she was burning up just thinking about it. "No, but it is. We hardly even know each other." Dylan leaned against the car and pulled her close. He nuzzled her neck, making her shiver with the touch of his lips. His breath was hot as he spoke softly into her ear.
"Do you think we'll want each other more later, Celeste?"
She could barely speak, let alone think. "That's not—"
"Do you want to feel how much I want you, Celeste?"
"No," she said in near panic. His sexy laugh made her heart flip over.
"It's okay. You don't have to touch me. I just want to touch you."
"Not now," she told him, before she realized what she was saying.
"When? Do you want to come over tomorrow night?"
"No, I have to, She was in such a daze that she couldn't think of a single thing that she had to do.
"How about dinner then? Will you go out to dinner with me?"
That seemed safe enough. "Okay." He kissed her lightly.
"I've got to work tomorrow. Is it okay if I pick you up at 7?
"Yeah, that's fine." She watched him leave, wondering how she had fallen under his spell again. Celeste spent part of the next day over at Lily's house. Her friend tried on dozens of outfits in her excitement over her first date with Alex. She was glad for the distraction, because she was starting to get nervous about her date with Dylan. With a jolt, she realized that this was only their second date. How could she let things get so out of control during their first date? She'd only had one brief kiss on her first date with Andrew. Celeste was determined to rein in her hormones this time and not allow Dylan to seduce her again. Lily finally decided on an outfit, and Celeste went home to get ready for her own date. She didn't know where he was taking her, so she wore a skirt and blouse to be on the safe side. Dylan showed up in jeans, but they looked new. He was also wearing a button-down shirt instead of one of his usual t-shirts.
"You look great,"
he said, echoing her thoughts about him. He held the car door open for her as her dad watched them leave.
"How'd I do?"
Dylan asked her with a smile after they were on their way. "He still doesn't trust you," Celeste laughed.
"Do you?"
He glanced at her with his dark eyes. "I don't trust myself around you," she admitted.
"You're a leader, Celeste, not a follower. I think you always know what you want."
He was watching the road, so he didn't see her reaction to his words. She was beginning to suspect that there was more to him than she had imagined. He was certainly smarter than she had originally thought he was. On some level, she knew that people were more complicated than they appeared to be. Labeling someone as one thing was never accurate, but it was something that just about everybody did. She wondered what his first impression of her had been. "Do you think I'm boring?" She blurted out the question without even being aware that she was going to ask it. That was what happened to her when she was around Dylan. She did things without planning them. It was like she had no control over her impulses. He seemed startled by the question.
"Boring? No, Celeste. I think you're smart and passionate. You like to keep people at a distance, but that makes it even more exciting to get close to you."
She studied him, trying to figure out if he meant what he said, or if it was all just a line to get her into bed. "Is that really what you think?"
"Yes,"
he answered.
"Why? Who said you were boring?"
"Someone who wanted to get closer to me," she said, not really wanting to get into it.
"Let me guess. He couldn't turn you on, so he tried to blame you for it."
He glanced over at her and saw her gaping at him in astonishment.
"It was an educated guess, Celeste. You already told me that nobody else has made you come."
"I don't want to talk about that." She shook her head to emphasize her distaste for the subject.
"But you think about it, don't you? You want me to touch you again, don't you, Celeste?"
His low, intimate voice had an almost hypnotic effect on her. She didn't answer, and she was relieved when he turned on the radio to alleviate the silence. Why was she continuing to go out with him? She had known what he was from the beginning, yet she had allowed herself to get caught up in his game. As he had said, she usually always knew what she wanted. Did that mean that she wanted him? Celeste knew that this thing with Dylan was going nowhere, but maybe she didn't care. Maybe she wanted what she could have right now. Celeste was pulled out of her wayward thoughts when they arrived at the Greek restaurant. She was surprised when Dylan was greeted by name by the waitstaff inside. Even more astonishing was the fact that Jenna was one of the waitresses. "Hi, Jenna," Celeste said, relieved that she remembered her name. "I didn't know that you work here." "Yeah, it's my family's place," Jenna grimaced. "I have no choice." "But that's wonderful," Celeste enthused. "They have their own business." "Yeah, I guess. Anyway, welcome. I'll show you to your table." She led them to their seats and took their drink order. "I didn't know she's Greek," Celeste said as she opened her menu.
"Most people at school don't. She told me her grandfather was really mad when her parents didn't give her a Greek name."
Dylan apparently didn't need to look at the menu to know what he wanted to order. Jenna returned with their drinks, and Celeste decided on the gyro platter. Dylan ordered the same thing, but he told her that everything on the menu was good.
"The place my mom works at is good too, but I can't afford it. She makes great tips working there, though."
"This is fine," Celeste assured him. "You seem to be really good friends with Jenna." She was curious about his relationship with the only girl in his band.
"I've known her since elementary school. She was in my class every year, and we became friends. We didn't hang out together once we got to middle school, but I remembered that she used to take guitar lessons. I decided to find out if she knew how to play when I was looking to start a band," he explained. "She had moved on from acoustic to electric guitar, so it worked out great."
That's so nice. Celeste thought it was sweet of him to seek out his childhood friend. Most guys wouldn't even have thought of having a female guitarist in the band.
She knew that Alex played drums, so she suggested him for the band, he continued. Danny heard about it from Alex, and we had our band.
Danny, she repeated. I couldn't remember his name. He plays guitar just like Jenna.
He plays bass guitar, Dylan corrected. Jenna plays lead guitar.
Oh. Celeste really didn't understand the difference. You guys sound great.
Did you like our new song?
Dylan asked. She flushed and looked down at the table. Yeah.
I wrote it about you,
he said as he touched her hand. She was stunned to hear that, and her eyes flitted up to look at him. Me?
I was thinking about you, and the lyrics just came together in my mind. It's never been that easy for me to write a song before. You inspired me, Celeste.
His gaze was too intense, and she had to look away. You wrote exactly how I felt, she admitted shyly.
Yeah.
Even that one word was loaded with sexual tension. He cleared his throat.
Talk about something else. I need a distraction.
Her body flooded with heat at what that statement implied. She struggled to think of a different topic. I'm going to see my baby niece tomorrow.
How old is she?
Dylan asked. She's only a month old, and she's the cutest thing ever. Celeste smiled as she pictured the adorable baby. We're going over my brother's house. That's where my parents were last night. They were babysitting so Billy and his wife could go out. It was a big deal, because that was the first time they were out together alone since they had the baby.
How much older is your brother than you?
His voice was back to normal now. He's 6 years older than me. 23 is kind of young to be a dad, but he loves it. Allie is definitely his little princess. That's short for Allison, she informed him. Do you want to have kids? Celeste asked suddenly. He didn't even have to think about it.
Yeah, I do. Someday.
Really? She hadn't expected that answer. Even though you don't want a relationship?
I'm in high school right now. Of course I'll want to have a relationship with the mother of my child. I don't think anybody wants to be alone forever, Dylan said.
No, she said thoughtfully. I guess they don't. For a moment, she imagined a little boy who looked like Dylan and wondered who his mother would be. Then she mentally shook herself out of her musings. So, do you have any brothers or sisters?
Yeah, my dad's remarried. I've got a little brother in Arizona. He's 5.
He smiled with obvious affection for his sibling. He talked about his brother, and Celeste shared stories about her brother. Their conversation was easy and comfortable until the food arrived. They enjoyed their meals and said goodbye to Jenna after Dylan paid the check. The pleasant mood continued as they held hands while they walked to the car. The atmosphere changed once Dylan put the key in the ignition and turned on the engine.
Where should I drive you, Celeste?
His dark eyes regarded her solemnly.
I like being alone with you, but I don't want you to be upset, so I'll leave it up to you. Do you want to go home?
Celeste was torn between what she wanted to do and what she should do. She gazed directly at him once she made her decision, but a slight tremor in her voice revealed her nervousness. I want to go to your house. Chapter 13. Dylan kissed her as soon as they entered his house. He kept kissing her while he pushed the front door closed. Then he walked her back against the door and pressed his body against hers so that she could feel how much he wanted her. She moaned into his mouth while he cupped her breast with his hand. He had hardly been able to concentrate on the road after she told him that she wanted to go to his house. What she had really been saying was that she wanted him. Now he could indulge his desire to touch her body the way he'd been fantasizing about every day since the last time they'd been alone in his house. His lips moved from her mouth to trail kisses down her throat. Then he stood, gazing into her eyes, while he unbuttoned her blouse. Her chest rose and fell with her erratic breathing as he slipped the blouse off her shoulders. She moaned again as he lightly teased her nipples through her bra by brushing his fingers over them. He saw the lust in her blue eyes as he removed her bra to expose her full breasts to his hot gaze. She gasped and leaned back against the door when his wet mouth closed over her nipple. He slipped his hand under her skirt at the same time as he moved his mouth to her other nipple. Her moans were driving him wild, and he slid his hand up her thigh to her wet panties. He kept sucking on her nipple while his hand glided into her panties, and he began to stroke her. The crescendo of her moans alerted him to her approaching orgasm. She cried out and leaned weakly against the door after she came. Dylan waited for her to catch her breath and then led her to sit down on the couch. Even though she was half naked, she wasn't embarrassed this time as she kissed him passionately. Then she watched his face as she laid her hand over the bulge in his jeans. A low moan escaped him at the pleasure of finally having her touch him, even if it was through his clothes. Then he inhaled sharply as she dropped her eyes to his crotch and began to unzip his jeans. She slipped her hand inside his underwear, and he groaned when he felt her hand close around him. Celeste pulled down his underwear to set his erection free. She licked her lips nervously, and Dylan felt himself harden even more. He moaned when she began to stroke him up and down. It had been a long time since he came this way, but watching a topless Celeste do this for him was so hot that he didn't last very long. Her face was flushed after he came, and she murmured that she was going to get a towel. She returned and handed him the towel before retrieving her clothes from the floor. Dylan cleaned himself off and pulled up his underwear so that he could zip up his jeans. He stood up and kissed Celeste as she was buttoning up her blouse. She stopped him as he began to put his hand beneath her skirt again. "What are you doing?"
"I want to give you another one," he told her.
"Dylan," she protested, "I have to go home."
"It's still early. Take off your skirt," he urged. "I want to taste you."
Celeste blushed crimson. "That's—" She shook her head. "No, you can't do that."
"Why not?"
Dylan asked.
"I promise you'll like it."
She suddenly realized that he had taken advantage of her distraction with the disagreement to stealthily find his way under her skirt again. His hand was stroking her through her soaked panties. Her moan was all the encouragement he needed. He moved to stand behind her and pulled aside her panties to get access to her pleasure spot. Then he walked her back to the couch with him and sat her down on his lap. His finger stroked her until she neared a second climax. She was too aroused to argue when he set her aside and moved to kneel on the floor in front of her. He hooked her legs over his shoulders and leaned in between them. She gasped at the feel of his velvet tongue, and she nearly screamed with the intensity of her orgasm. He was looking at her with a heated gaze.
"I knew you would like it."
His voice was husky with desire, and she saw the bulge in his jeans when he stood up. She feared that he would now want to have sex in the usual way, but he just smiled at her.
"I'll be right back."
He grabbed the towel and left the room. Celeste finished buttoning her blouse and waited for her turn in the bathroom. She straightened out her panties and washed her hands. Then she splashed some cool water on her face. She looked in the mirror and was surprised to see that she looked presentable. Nobody could tell by looking at her that she had just made out wantonly with Dylan. She wondered what would happen once she went all the way with him. Would she become one of his women? The way things were going, it wouldn't be long before she gave in to her desire for him. What she had let him do to her, and what she had done to him had been unthinkable to her just 2 weeks ago. After Andrew called her boring, she had watched porn on her computer. Celeste had been completely turned off by the explicit scenes, but she had remembered how the women had stroked the man as she touched Dylan. What had played out with him in real life had not turned her off at all. She had a lot to think about and some important decisions to make. Whatever happened, she was not going to be part of his harem. If he went back to seeing other girls, she was going to break it off with him for good. Chapter 14. Celeste hadn't expected Dylan to be so attentive to her after he got what he wanted. Even though they hadn't gone all the way yet, he had already succeeded in seducing her. She had thought that he would stop flirting with her, now that he knew how hot she was for him. He surprised her by sending her a sweet text message the next day.
"I'm thinking of you. Hope you have a great day with your family."
She had woken up that morning feeling ashamed of herself for her behavior the previous night, so his message brightened her mood immensely. Celeste texted him back that she was thinking of him too, and wished him a great day also. She was smiling as she got ready to visit her brother and his family. Her parents asked about her date with Dylan, and she told them about Jenna and her family's restaurant. Celeste was glad to have an interesting story to tell them, and she had no problem keeping her mind off what had happened after dinner while talking to her parents. When they arrived at her brother's apartment, the baby was, naturally, the center of attention. Allie was still too little to be able to do much of anything, but Celeste was happy just to hold her and tell her how cute she was. The little girl stared at her with clueless innocence, and Celeste laughed in delight. Her parents were discussing babysitting Allie when her sister-in-law, Cora, returned to work in a couple of weeks after her maternity leave ended. She was an engineer, just like Billy. They had met in college and discovered that they had the same major. Now, both their jobs paid well, and they were saving up to buy a house. Celeste's mom was a retired schoolteacher, and she was thrilled to be able to spend so much time with her first grandchild. They all enjoyed their visit, even though Billy embarrassed Celeste when he joked that she wasn't allowed to date until he approved of her new boyfriend. She wasn't sure what her brother would think of Dylan, but she knew that her parents wished she would end up with someone who was similar to her, as Cora was to Billy. After she arrived home from her visit with her family, Celeste called Lily to find out how she enjoyed her date with Alex. Lily, who was already naturally upbeat, sounded positively giddy with happiness. She'd had a wonderful time with Alex, and he had kissed her at the end of their evening. He had already asked her to go out with him again next weekend. Celeste was glad for Lily, but she felt a little blue as she listened to her innocent gushing over how sweet Alex was. Her relationship with Dylan seemed so much more complicated by comparison. She wished that her biggest concern was what outfit to wear when they went out on a date. Things had escalated so quickly between them, but she couldn't put all the blame on Dylan. She was the one who had told him to take her to his house this last time, knowing full well that things were likely to go too far again. Celeste couldn't deny that she was extremely attracted to Dylan, but did she feel anything else for him? She had never imagined herself as the kind of person who could be involved in a relationship that was just physical. At the beginning, she'd seen Dylan as just a good-looking guy and had a low opinion of him. Her opinion of him had changed as she got to know him. He was more interesting than she had imagined at first, but he was also easier to relate to than she ever would have suspected. Beneath the player image was a regular person with dreams about the future. She had found him surprisingly easy to talk to, and she enjoyed spending time with him beyond how he made her body feel. Did that mean that she liked him as more than a sex partner? As for sex, what was she going to do about it? She could only see 3 options. She could insist on spending all their dates in public, break up with Dylan, or have sex with Dylan. She wasn't going to fool herself into denying that's where they were headed. They had gone so far already that there wasn't much further to go. She had to make a decision before next weekend, and she wasn't going to falter from it once it was decided. Dylan was waiting for her by her locker on Monday.
"I missed you."
"It's only been 1 day since you saw me," she said, but she beamed with pleasure at his words.
That's too long.
He gave her a sweet kiss.
You always taste good.
The heated look he gave her would have been enough to set her pulse racing without the sultry memory his words brought to mind. She tried to push the intimate image from her thoughts. How was your day?
It was okay. I worked and then I hung out with my mom. She wants to meet you sometime this week if you have time after school. Maybe I could give you a ride one day,
Dylan said. You told your mom about me? This pleased her greatly.
Of course I told her about my girlfriend. He smiled at her. How about Friday? We can go straight from my house to the Greek festival and grab dinner there.
He was still acting like a real boyfriend, and Celeste made her first decision of the week. She wasn't going to break up with Dylan. The rest would have to be decided later, but she was going to meet his mom and go on another date with him. Yeah, that sounds fun.
Great. I'll let Mom know. Anyway, I made you a copy of our new song.
He handed her the CD before giving her another quick kiss and taking off for class. She had a student council meeting after school, and the Battle of the Bands was on the agenda. Andrew was cool towards her, but civil enough to work with her on what needed to be done. Celeste surreptitiously watched the way Olivia looked at him and wondered how she had never noticed it before. What a tangled mess it all was, but there was nothing she could do to set it right. Celeste did her workout right away when she arrived home. She always liked to get it done before dinner if she could, but today she also had nervous energy to burn. Her mother shook her head at her and remarked that it was a nice day. Celeste didn't care, because she liked to walk on the treadmill while listening to music. That way she could zone out and not have to watch where she was going. It was nice sometimes to stop thinking and just be. She was sweaty after she was done, but she felt good. Her shower refreshed her, and she was able to relax during dinner. She listened to Dylan's new song after she finished her homework. Hearing his voice had an immediate effect on her. Besides the sensual power of the song, knowing that he had written it about her was even more exciting. How many girls had songs written about them? She had to admit that he had a talent for writing very sexy songs that weren't explicit. The music fit the lyrics perfectly to invoke a sexually charged mood. Dylan and Jenna worked together flawlessly as songwriting partners. Celeste could understand why they wouldn't risk ruining that by becoming romantically involved. Her thoughts again turned to her own relationship with Dylan. She didn't know how to categorize what was between them. It wasn't progressing like a normal relationship, even though he was acting like a real boyfriend. They were supposed to get emotionally close before she felt comfortable with the physical stuff, but it was happening in reverse. He was getting past her inhibitions, and everything felt so natural with him physically. She would have slapped any other guy who tried to put his hands where she had allowed Dylan to touch her. Celeste decided to try and slow things down. She wouldn't be alone with him at his house this weekend, and she would see how he reacted to that. In the meantime, her parents were surprised when she told them that she was meeting Dylan's mom on Friday. It worked like a charm in making them agree to Dylan driving her to school. She could see how clever he had been in going about it this way. They were also pleased to hear that he was taking her to the Greek festival. She knew they had feared that all her dates with him would consist of going to wild parties. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt when he picked her up on Friday morning, and Celeste was dressed the same way. She was pretty sure that she didn't have to impress his mom by dressing up. Going straight to Dylan's house after school made it feel more like the weekend than her usual Friday afternoon routine. She saw that he resembled his mom, and she could see why she had been a model. The woman was still beautiful, with the same dark eyes and brunette hair as her son. Celeste deduced that the only reason she hadn't been more successful in the modeling world was her height. She wasn't very tall, and that had probably been what prevented her from making a career out of it. Ms. Thomas greeted Celeste with much more enthusiasm than her parents had shown Dylan. "I kept the last name after the divorce, but I'm not Mrs. anymore," she explained. Dylan Thomas was a poet, and I had to give my son that first name since he already got the last name from his father. She was one of those people who immediately told you odd details about herself. Celeste found her to be a friendly and charming person. She remarked that Celeste's last name, Winters, was delightful. It makes me think of a serene landscape blanketed by snow. Dylan smiled at her with affection.
Mom has the heart of a poet.
So do you, but you just put your poems to music, she said. How do you like your love poem, Celeste? Celeste was confused at first, and then blushed when she realized that Ms. Thomas was talking about ecstasy. It wasn't explicit, but it was racy enough for her never to reveal to her own mother that Dylan had written it about her. He must have a much more open relationship with his mom.
It's not a love song,
Dylan hastened to deny.
It's the same type of song as Here With You, and you never called that a love song.
That one is all about the attraction, and this one is all about the person. You did everything but put her name in it. Only a person who makes an impact on you can inspire you. She smiled at Celeste. You've made a big impression on Dylan. He couldn't wait to tell me what you said the first time you heard him sing.
Mom.
It was the first time Celeste had ever seen Dylan look embarrassed. Celeste was relieved to talk about something else. He's really talented. Even my friend said that he's a rock star, and she hardly ever compliments anyone. He had the chance to be in a new boy band last year, but he turned it down. That's when he decided to form his own band. Most people wouldn't have passed up an opportunity like that, but Dylan believes in his dream. His mom looked at him with a mix of pride and wonder. Celeste was stunned by this revelation. You never told me that. How did that happen? He looked embarrassed again.
Mom sent a DVD of me singing to a record company.
I have a friend who works at a big label, and she got somebody to watch it. They wanted him to join their new boy band, but he refused. As an aside, Ms. Thomas named the band, and Celeste's eyes went wide. But you would have made it big already, Celeste said. Isn't that what you want?
I want to do it my way, with my own kind of music, instead of playing up some teen image. I'm in it for the music.
He had said something like that before, when he had told her that he wasn't in it for the groupies. They sat talking with his mom for about an hour, and then Dylan decided that it was time to leave. Celeste said goodbye to Ms. Thomas and followed Dylan outside, but he opened the garage instead of heading for his car.
This is my chance to give you a ride on my bike without your parents freaking.
I don't know. She realized this would mean returning to his house to get the car before he drove her home.
Come on,
he urged.
It's a perfect day for it. We might not get another chance until spring.
The truth was that she had wanted to go for a ride since the first time she saw his motorcycle. Okay, she said, with unconcealed excitement. He had an extra helmet for her, and he helped her put it on. Then he swung his leg over the bike and put on his own helmet. He motioned for her to approach the motorcycle and told her where to rest her feet. She climbed on behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist. Her heart leapt up into her throat as they took off down the street. She had never done anything that felt so dangerous and thrilling.
Did you like it?
Dylan asked after they pulled into the parking lot at the festival. Yeah, it was fun. She took off her helmet and grinned at him. They walked around the festival and tried the delicious food. There were also many wares for sale beneath rows of tents. After wandering leisurely through them, Dylan told her that he had a surprise for her. He led her to an open area where a crowd had gathered. She saw a group of dancers dressed in traditional Greek costumes and spotted Jenna among them. Music began to play, and the dancers delighted the audience with their lively steps. Celeste watched in amazement as all the dancers moved in unison without looking at their feet. It was a joyful dance, and she was swept up in the happy atmosphere. She clapped with enthusiasm when the performance ended. Dylan pulled her aside and began to show her some simple steps. The music began again, and the audience was apparently invited to join this time. Celeste and Dylan found a place at the end of the line, and she followed his lead as she began to dance. She started to get the hang of it, but she kept a careful watch on her feet. Celeste glanced at Dylan and saw that he moved with ease. By the end of the dance, she was having a blast and laughing in delight. They found Jenna, and Celeste bombarded her with compliments. She laughed when Celeste said she wished that she was Greek. "How much ouzo has she had?" Jenna asked Dylan. "Ouzo?" Celeste questioned. "It's an alcoholic drink," Jenna explained. "Very potent."
"You don't even feel it at first,"
Dylan added.
"It sneaks up on you."
"I know the feeling," Celeste said wryly. "So, have you been drinking?" Jenna wagged her finger at them. "No, I was talking about something else. She couldn't think of a single suitable thing to say that would explain that comment. "Your culture is so fun." She was beginning to wish that she really had drunk some ouzo. Then she wouldn't be responsible for what she said. "Thanks," Jenna said, laughing again. "I'm glad you're having fun." She was. Celeste was having a great time on what was not at all a typical date. This was the last place that she had expected the school player to bring her. It wasn't what would be considered cool, but it didn't take away from his appeal. In fact, it only enhanced his desirability. He did what he wanted to do without being trapped by a certain image. If he felt like dancing to Greek folk music, that's what he did. Celeste admired his spontaneity. She was in a tremendously good mood when they left the festival. This time, she became aware of how sexy this mode of travel was as she pressed her body against Dylan. He must have thought the same thing, because he kissed her as soon as they dismounted from the bike and took their helmets off.
"That was a hot ride, Celeste." His hands skimmed her hips.
"Yeah," she agreed.
"Come inside, and I'll give you a better ride than that."
Oh, the things his sexy voice did to her. She was seriously tempted. "Another time," she promised. "I need to go home now."
"Okay."
He obliged her request without complaining and drove her home in his car. He gave her a brief kiss, but he placed his hand on her knee.
"I want to write more songs about you. Good night, Celeste."
"Good night, Dylan." She waited for him to let go of her knee before getting out of the car. He watched her until she opened her front door and then backed out of her driveway. Celeste had managed to triumph over her hormones tonight, but it was only one battle in an ongoing war. Chapter 15. What the hell happened to you, Dylan? He realized that he had zoned out and refocused his attention on Kayla.
"Sorry, I didn't hear what you said."
"No, you didn't. You usually don't miss a thing, and you always know the right thing to say. But now you're not even paying attention anymore. What is going on with you?" Kayla demanded.
"I've just got a lot on my mind right now," he told her.
"You've only got one thing on your mind," she snapped. "Just do her already and move on." She was right about one thing. Getting naked with Celeste consumed his thoughts, but he didn't want to move on. He wanted to keep getting naked with her.
"What do you want, Kayla?"
His tone was impatient. "I said that I can't hook up with you anymore. I have a boyfriend," she announced. He was happy for her.
"That's great."
Dylan smiled at her. "That's all you have to say? We've been having sex for a year. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" Tears glittered in her eyes. He had no experience dealing with emotional women, and he felt like he was walking through a minefield.
"It was amazing. That was some of the best sex I've ever had."
She closed her eyes. "Well, I have my answer." When she looked at him again, her gaze was hard. "Don't you even want to know who my boyfriend is?" Dylan didn't really care, but he obliged her.
"Who is he?"
"It's Andrew. You know, your girlfriend's ex." Her lips twisted into an ugly smile. "I guess he'll be getting all my best now." Kayla had never been a bitchy girl. Dylan was disturbed to discover she was capable of such venom.
"Is that why you went after him? To hurt Celeste?"
"Not everything is about your precious Celeste," she retorted. "Maybe I want a guy who's into me. Andrew can't take his eyes off me. When he's around me, it's like he doesn't even notice that any other girl exists." This was not the time to bring up that he had made it clear to her from the beginning that he wasn't a one-woman kind of a man. She had been the one who was pretending that she was okay with their arrangement.
"I'm glad you found what you were looking for, Kayla."
"Me too." She began to walk away from him. "See you around, Dylan," she threw back at him. He finally got into his car. The student parking lot was nearly empty now, and he waited to make sure that Kayla drove away before he took off. She was upset, but his conscience was clear. He had never lied to her. It wasn't his fault that she had wanted more than he could give her. Dylan wondered how Celeste would take the news that Andrew was dating Kayla. It was Olivia, not Celeste, who was upset about Andrew's new girlfriend. She had beaten Dylan to the punch by calling Celeste with the news. Celeste then called him after spending most of the afternoon and evening at Olivia's house.
"Are you okay?"
Dylan asked her. "Yeah," she said. "Why wouldn't I be?" He smiled to himself, thinking that he and Celeste were more alike than she thought.
"He was your boyfriend."
Now there was a pause. "I guess I'm over him." He couldn't see her since they were on the phone, but he imagined her shrugging after that statement. His mood had lightened considerably, and he realized that he had been expecting some kind of drama with Celeste.
"I'm glad,"
he said, and he meant it. He had the urge to kiss her, but it had nothing to do with sex, oddly enough. "I just feel so bad for Olivia," she exclaimed. "She's more upset now than I was when Andrew broke up with me." Once again, Dylan inexplicably had a surge of feel-good emotions. He reminded himself that he was supposed to be commiserating with Celeste over Olivia.
"Hopefully she'll get over him too."
"I hope so." There was another pause. "Weren't you and Kayla,
"Yeah,"
he confirmed.
"but it was just a casual thing. She wasn't my girlfriend."
He almost added, "Not like you," and then he wondered where that thought had come from. "That's right," Celeste agreed. "You did tell me that you don't want a serious relationship." It was a reminder for Celeste that he wasn't the kind of guy she should be involved with. Yet she was powerfully drawn to him and looked forward to spending time with him. She would get this surge of excitement every time she saw him approaching. It was crazy how much he was in her thoughts. Her mind kept replaying the last time they had been alone together. She was unable to banish the erotic memory, and she became hot with desire at the mere thought of his touch. It was getting worse with each passing day that she saw him, but couldn't indulge her passion for him. She had trouble concentrating in her classes because she kept drifting off into all kinds of naughty fantasies about Dylan.
"I'm going crazy thinking about you,"
Dylan told her on the phone Thursday night.
"Please tell me you'll come over this weekend."
She had already made her decision. "I'll come over," she promised.
"I can't wait,"
he said. "Me too," she admitted. Surprisingly, Dylan didn't say anything sexual. He didn't even send her any dirty text messages. Their unspoken thoughts were conveyed in the intensely charged atmosphere between them on Friday. They stared at each other for a full minute beside Celeste's locker that morning.
"I'd invite you to come watch us practice tonight, but I'm afraid I'll forget all the songs if you're there,"
Dylan said.
"I don't even know how I'm going to make it through the movie tomorrow."
"Let's just watch TV," she suggested. There was no way she'd be able to sit through a 2-hour movie with her anticipation building to a fever pitch.
"Good idea."
He became lost in her eyes again until the warning bell rang. Dylan didn't know what was wrong with him. He hadn't been this nervous since he first started having sex. Celeste was ready to have sex with him. He was sure of it, but it was having a strange effect on him. His confidence was slipping the closer he got to getting what he wanted. It wasn't like him to have performance anxiety. He had to snap out of it before tomorrow night. If he faltered, Celeste might change her mind. Hopefully, his jam session tonight would help him relax. Celeste, on the other hand, was able to let go of her worry. Once she made a decision, she didn't stress about it. She would usually focus on what she needed to do to attain her goal, but Dylan already wanted her as much as she wanted him. He was likely to have condoms at his house, so all she had to do was get ready for her date. Instead of spending all day Saturday waiting for the time to arrive, she went to the indoor ice skating rink with Lily and Olivia. They were on a mission to cheer up Olivia, and the three of them did have fun. Being on the ice brought back childhood memories when life was more carefree. Celeste hadn't told her friends about her plans with Dylan. She felt that it was private, and it was also not the time to talk about boyfriends with Olivia. She got in the shower and shaved her legs when she returned home from her outing with her friends. Celeste let her hair dry naturally as she ate dinner with her parents. She wore a pair of jeans and a sweater because the evenings were cooler now. Her makeup consisted of only some pale lipstick. She didn't bother with blush because her skin was already slightly flushed with excitement. Dylan picked her up, and her temperature steadily increased as they neared his house. She was the one who made the first move this time. He barely had enough time to close the door before she pulled him into a kiss.
"I guess we're skipping the TV,"
he said before kissing her again. "Where's your room?" Celeste asked the next time they broke apart. He took her hand and walked with her. Then he motioned for her to go up the stairs ahead of him. Once they reached the second floor, he took the lead and showed her to his room. She didn't stop to look around because all her focus was on Dylan. He wore jeans and a white t-shirt, and he looked sexy as sin. His brown hair always had that slightly mussed look that made her want to run her fingers through it. Yet it was the intensity in his dark eyes that pulled her in deep. Taking the plunge, she stepped into his embrace. He kissed her slowly this time, savoring the moment, tasting and teasing her lips before slipping his tongue into her mouth. He fanned the flames of her desire. Wanting closer contact with his body, she slid her hands under his shirt and ran them up his chest. He responded by kissing her urgently and grasping her rear. Then he moved his hands up under her sweater and unhooked her bra. Dylan pulled away from her long enough to lift her sweater over her head and remove her bra. He yanked his t-shirt off and threw it on the floor along with her discarded clothes. Celeste pressed herself against him and enjoyed the feeling of skin on skin. Heat unfurled low in her belly at this intimate contact. They kissed passionately until Dylan broke the kiss and moved his mouth down her throat to her collarbone. Celeste tipped her head back and moaned as he flicked his tongue teasingly at her nipples.
"Do you want more?"
His husky voice inflamed her further with the seductive question. "Yes," she gasped. He took her nipple into his mouth while his hands undid her jeans. Then he straightened up to look into her eyes. Celeste pushed her jeans down her legs and stepped out of them. She unzipped Dylan's jeans, and he took them off. He bent forward and slowly pulled her panties down her legs. Her heart was pounding in her chest as she stepped out of her panties to stand naked before him. He kissed her in a surprisingly tender manner before he took her hand to lead her to his bed. She sat down and lay back while he stood gazing down at her. His eyes traveled the length of her body before returning to her face.
"You're gorgeous, Celeste."
Of course, he would know the perfect thing to say, but the way he said it did make her feel beautiful. "You're not so bad yourself," she smiled, and her eyes moved over him appreciatively. She swallowed nervously when he removed his underwear. This was really happening. Dylan came to lay on the bed with her, and his hot kiss made her forget her momentary apprehension. His hand slid down between her legs, making her moan. It was different than the last time, because she was completely exposed to him. She felt free to indulge herself in lustful abandon, and she boldly explored his body with her hands. Celeste began to stroke him the way she had last time, but she soon became distracted by the pleasure he was giving her. She closed her eyes as her approaching climax became a desperate, all-consuming need. Dylan rolled away from her and took a condom out of the nightstand after she came. He put it on while her breathing began to return to normal.
"So wet and ready,"
he rasped after he slipped a finger inside her. He positioned himself between her legs, and Celeste braced herself. Dylan entered her with one quick thrust and froze when she cried out in pain. His eyes went wide with shock. Celeste couldn't stand to see him look at her in that horrified way. "Don't stop," she pleaded, and awkwardly moved her hips in a clumsy attempt to mimic what she had seen the woman in the porno movie do. Dylan groaned and began to thrust into her while she bit her lip to keep from crying out again. He finished quickly and moved off of her to collapse on the bed beside her. His breathing was ragged, and he flung his arm up to cover his eyes. Celeste watched him, unsure of what she was supposed to do or say now. After a moment, he moved his arm off his face and turned an accusatory gaze on her. She had just given up her virginity to a guy she had only been seeing for a month, but he was the one who was distraught.
"Why didn't you tell me you were a virgin?"
"What difference does it make?" Celeste asked.
"I don't do virgins,"
Dylan yelled. She was getting angry now, too. "Isn't that what this was about? Remember when you said that you wanted to try a good girl? That's why you were after Melissa?"
"I was never going to have sex with Melissa,"
he said in indignation.
"I was just having a little fun flirting with her. Fuck! I never would have touched you if I knew you were a virgin."
She couldn't believe this. Dylan, the notorious player, was seriously upset about having sex with her. "Well, I'm not a virgin anymore, so there's no use going on about it. What's done is done."
"How could you just give it up to me?"
Dylan demanded.
"You're not even drunk."
"Now you're blaming me?" Celeste shot back. "You've been trying to seduce me since the first day I talked to you. Anyway, what's so terrible about what happened?"
"It was a mistake,"
he said. "A mistake," she fumed. "How can you say that?"
"This will never work,"
he told her with a resentful glare.
"We're too different."
"So that's it," she retorted. "You're worried that I'll become attached to you. Don't flatter yourself." She stood up and began putting her clothes back on. "It's not like I was expecting to cuddle or anything. I knew what I was getting myself into." Now he felt remorse for what he had said. Her first time should have been special, and it shouldn't have been with him.
"Celeste, I'm sorry."
"Whatever. Just drive me home and I'll be out of your hair." She zipped up her jeans and pulled her sweater on over her head. He followed her as she swept out of his room.
"Celeste, are you okay?"
"Fine." She glanced back at him. "You might want to put your clothes on before we leave." Dylan realized that he was still wearing the condom and grimaced when he saw the blood on it. After disposing of it in the bathroom, he returned to his room and got dressed quickly, cursing himself the entire time. She hadn't seemed like a virgin, although he had no experience with virgins. He had heard the rumors about her and Tommy, and he had assumed that they were true. Even if they weren't, he had been convinced that she had slept with her boyfriend. They had been together for months. How was it possible to be with someone that long and not act on your desire? Celeste was standing near the front door and staring off into space when he went downstairs. She snapped out of it as he approached her and didn't say a word to him as she flung open the door. They walked to his car in silence. She ignored him during the drive to her house while he tried to think of something to say, something that would make things better. He tried to take her hand when they arrived in her driveway, but she rejected his overture. "I got the message loud and clear, Dylan. Don't worry. This isn't my first breakup." She got out of the car and walked stiffly to her front door. He watched her enter the house without glancing back at him even once. Dylan didn't ever remember feeling as terrible as he did right now. Chapter 16. Celeste didn't cry. She had known all along that this thing with Dylan wouldn't last, yet she had slept with him anyway, and she wasn't sure why. Was it a form of rebellion against her routine, sedate life? Maybe she was worried that she would never feel such intense passion for anyone ever again. She certainly had never wanted to have sex before she met Dylan. That was what was troubling her the most about this. Why hadn't she felt desire for Andrew when she'd gone out with him for months? Shouldn't you get closer to someone the longer you were with them? Celeste felt like she wasn't sure of her identity anymore, because she had never thought she'd do something like this. At least if she regretted it, she'd be able to call it a mistake and move on. But she didn't regret it. She had wanted her first time to be with Dylan. The same question nagged at her. Why? There seemed to be no answer forthcoming, so she decided not to dwell on it. It was over anyway, and she needed to get back to her normal life and leave this madness behind. Since Dylan would no longer be trying to seduce her, it would be easier to put him out of her mind. Once the battle of the bands was over, she could go back to ignoring his presence at school. They didn't hang out with the same people, and the time they had spent together would begin to fade from their thoughts. She would still be reminded of him while Lily was dating Alex, but her friend wasn't likely to mention Dylan all that much. She would naturally talk about her boyfriend more than his friends. Celeste called both Lily and Olivia on Sunday to tell them that she and Dylan had broken up. She said it was a mutual decision, and that they both realized it wasn't going to work out between them. Lily was saddened by the news, and said that she hoped they would get back together. Olivia asked her if anything had happened to bring this on. Celeste wasn't about to reveal that she had already slept with Dylan, so she said it was just clear to both of them that the relationship had run its course. Dylan was more honest when he told Jenna about his breakup with Celeste.
"I fucked up."
"You sure did," she agreed. "So, what are you going to do about it?"
"Nothing. I can't change what happened," he said.
"Sure you can," she reasoned. "Go ask her to get back together with you."
"That's not what I was talking about. I can't get into the details, but I made a mistake and—"
Jenna cut him off impatiently. "Breaking up with Celeste was a mistake, but you'll make an even bigger mistake if you don't get back together with her."
"It's not going to work. She doesn't belong with me," he said.
"It was working," Jenna insisted. "You guys were really into each other. Everybody could see it, so don't try to deny it. You're just freaking because you stepped out of your comfort zone."
"My comfort zone?"
Dylan questioned. She nodded. "Yeah, you're used to staying detached, but you care about Celeste. It's making you run scared."
"I'm not scared, and Celeste isn't any more important to me than anyone else."
"Really?" Jenna asked. "Then why are you so upset?" He wasn't sure why he was still bothered by the whole thing. It had been a huge shock to discover that she had been a virgin. Dylan couldn't wrap his mind around the fact that she had chosen to lose her virginity to him. Celeste had chosen him. He didn't know how to feel about that, but he couldn't stop thinking about it. There was no point in trying to get back together with her. He hated the way things ended between them, but she wasn't the kind of girl who would be satisfied with a casual relationship. She would eventually expect more from him, so it was better to leave her alone. Besides, she probably hated him now anyway, after how insensitive he had been to her after they had sex. He had ruined her first time, and he wished that he could make it up to her somehow. Dylan decided that he had to focus on something else, so he turned to his music to clear his head. Seeing Celeste at school was unavoidable, and he thought that he was prepared for it. She was walking down the hall, and they locked eyes for a long moment before she looked away to ignore him as they passed by each other. Dylan had expected the cold shoulder, but it left him yearning for her formerly warm demeanor toward him. He missed the way her eyes would light up when she saw him, and the slow smile that would spread over her face. That special smile had been just for him. Wait, what was he thinking? Yeah, he felt bad about the way he had handled things with Celeste, but he wasn't pining after her. Everyone seemed to know about their breakup by lunchtime, because Stephanie hurried to catch up with him before he got to the cafeteria. I heard you broke up with your girlfriend.
She broke up with me.
He didn't know what compelled him to say that. Whatever. Stephanie wasn't interested in the details of the breakup. Now that you're free, how about we skip classes the rest of the day while my parents are at work? She stepped closer to him and slid her hand beneath his t-shirt to play with the waistband of his jeans.
I can't get in trouble right now. It could cost us our place in the Battle of the Bands.
He had heard of no such rule, but she probably didn't know that. She looked at him blankly. You're going to be in the Battle of the Bands? When did you get in a band? He remembered now that he hadn't shared this part of his life with any of his women. Only Celeste knew about his music.
We're called Addicted,
he said, failing to answer her question. That's so cool. I can't wait to see the show now. She gave him a sultry smile. Maybe I can come over this weekend when your mom's at work.
Maybe,
he said.
We have to practice a lot because the show's only 2 weeks away.
They did have to practice, but he could always make time for sex. He always had before, but now he wasn't in any hurry to get back to his women. It had only been 2 days since he had had sex with Celeste, so he supposed that was why he wasn't tempted by Stephanie's offer. Things would get back to normal soon enough. He went home and wrote a new song instead of doing his homework. Dylan had never written a ballad before, but he knew that it would set them apart from the rest of the bands in the competition. They tended to stick to hard rocking songs that made them look cool. He called Jenna and told her he was emailing the lyrics to her. She was quiet for so long that he thought he had lost the connection.
Jenna, did you get them?
Yeah, she said. Have you told her how you feel?
It's just a song to help us win the competition. It's not about anyone. Anyway, do you think you can write the music in time for us to learn it for the show?
Dylan asked. There was more silence. Yeah, I'll have it ready by tomorrow. We should put in some extra practice before the show. She wasn't acting like Jenna, and he didn't like it. She wasn't messing with him or arguing with him. He wasn't used to this civil, somber Jenna.
Yeah, we'll practice, but you need to lighten up.
You need to get your head out of your ass. See you tomorrow. She had hung up on him. Dylan smiled at her rude statement. Now that was the Jenna he knew. She was wrong, though, about how much she was reading into the song. Sure, it had been inspired by what happened with Celeste, but that was just the starting point. It was like those movies that claimed to be based on a true story, and then they would turn out to have exaggerated the truth to make the story more interesting. That was the same thing he had done with the song. A ballad needed lots of emotion to be powerful, so he had added in the stuff about heartbreak. It wasn't nearly that serious in truth. Yeah, he felt kind of let down about the whole thing, but he wasn't heartbroken. He wondered how Celeste was handling things. She seemed to be doing just fine the next day when he saw her laugh at something the guy standing beside her had said. Why was this guy hanging out by her locker anyway? He was one of those clean-cut types, like her ex-boyfriend had been. Dylan saw him lean in closer to say something else, and his stomach clenched when Celeste lowered her eyes shyly. Where the hell was Melissa? Why wasn't she interrupting them the way she was always interrupting when Dylan was talking to Celeste? He wished that he could hear what she said to the guy in response. The bell rang, and the guy said something in parting before walking away. Celeste then spotted Dylan watching her and turned her back to him as she finished getting her books out of her locker. His legs were moving before he even realized his intent.
"What did he say to you?"
Celeste turned to look at him coldly. "That's none of your business." Frustration made his temper flare.
"So, what now? You're going to jump from my bed to his?"
Anger flashed in her blue eyes. "Isn't that what you do? Jump from bed to bed?"
"I haven't been with anyone since I got together with you."
His declaration did nothing to soften her attitude. "Sorry you had to make such a terrible sacrifice. Well, we're not together anymore, so there's nothing stopping you now. Or me," she added, twisting the knife in his gut. "Excuse me, I have to get to class." "What the hell happened to you?" Jenna asked when she saw his foul expression at lunch.
"Nothing,"
he snapped.
"Did you finish the music?"
"Yeah, I gave it to the guys to look it over," she said while she studied him. "Did you talk to Celeste?"
"Don't ever fucking mention her name to me again!"
Jenna stared speechlessly at him after his outburst. Dylan noticed the stares of the other people around them, too. His eyes scanned the cafeteria until they landed on Celeste, who was also watching him. It was too much, and he turned away and stalked out of the cafeteria. Everything had been so different only a month ago. Flirting with Celeste had been fun and easy. He had succeeded in his goal to seduce her, but the end result had left him unsatisfied. It should have been over, but he couldn't seem to let it go. Chapter 17. Celeste was mulling over what had happened with Dylan at school. Jacob had asked her out, and she had told him that she wasn't ready to date so soon after her breakup. She had no intention of sleeping with anyone else for a long time, but Dylan had riled her up and caused her to say things she didn't mean. Now that she'd had time to calm down, she realized that he was acting like a jealous boyfriend. Could he have feelings for her? He had been all upset and stormed out of the cafeteria. If the rumors could be believed, he'd gone off on Jenna when she mentioned Celeste. He had already gotten sex from her, so the only thing he could be upset about was their breakup. Celeste was so excited about this possibility that she could barely sleep. She wondered if she should call him, but she didn't want to appear desperate. Celeste wanted to get back together with Dylan, but her pride prevented her from making the first move. She would wait and see if he felt the same way about her as she did about him. Was this love? All she knew for sure was that she missed him and wanted to be with him. Listening to his songs now only made her sad for what might never be again between them. She resolved not to wallow in self-pity and tried to focus on other things. Seeing her niece every day after school always lifted her mood. It also reminded her that there was life after high school. Her brother hadn't met the girl he would marry until he went to college. Celeste didn't know what the future had in store for her, but she doubted that Dylan would be a part of it. She had gotten caught up in his philosophy of living in the moment, and she had forgotten that the moment would end. "I know what you mean," Olivia said. "Sometimes I can't wait for high school to be over, because I think college will be more exciting. Other times I'm sad because I'll probably never see Andrew again. God, I hate being so pathetic about him." "We're teenagers," Celeste stated. "We're allowed to be obsessed with our love lives, damn it." Olivia grinned at her. "At least we're not in that sickening he's so perfect phase like Lily. I wonder if Alex talks nonstop about her to his friends, too." Celeste smiled at the thought. "They're just too sweet," Olivia lamented. "I can't bash them." "Me either," Celeste agreed. "Anyway, we're just jealous." "Yeah," Olivia sighed. "I wonder what it's like to be that happy with someone." "Me too," Celeste said. "So you never felt that way with anyone?" Olivia didn't mention names, but Celeste imagined that she was curious about how deep her feelings for Andrew had been. Celeste spoke candidly. I think with Andrew, it was more of a friendship than a real romance, at least for me. It was so much more intense with Dylan, but I was too unsure of what we had to be able to feel happy.
Did you ever try talking to him about it?
Olivia asked. No. Dylan's not the type to talk about feelings. He doesn't get emotionally attached. At least he says he doesn't. Celeste was still pondering his recent behavior. Maybe you should talk to him anyway, Olivia advised. It's worth a try. At least that way, you'll know for sure. I think it might be better to just let it die, Celeste said. Do you really see any kind of future for us? I mean, let's be realistic. Love doesn't have anything to do with reason, Olivia replied. Celeste was astonished by her response. This has nothing to do with love. Maybe it does, Olivia suggested again. Maybe you've fallen for him. Celeste thought it over for a moment. I hope not. She didn't want to be casting longing looks after him every time he passed her by in the hallway. Celeste wanted to be able to let him go if he didn't want to be with her. She settled into her old routine as the days went by, but she wasn't content the way she had been before Dylan became part of her life. Sometimes she would catch him watching her, and he would instantly look away. She wondered what he was thinking and wished that he would talk to her. When she was able to observe him without him noticing, she saw that his demeanor had changed. He wasn't flirting with girls, not even when they flirted with him. He seemed more subdued than she had ever seen him. Celeste wanted to ask him what was wrong, but things were too awkward between them for her to approach him with her concern. If something serious had happened, she surely would have heard about it from Lily. Maybe he was just stressed about the competition. The Battle of the Bands was held on a Friday evening, and it was always a popular event. The tickets were sold out before the actual day arrived, and Celeste was busy making sure that everything was ready. She was going to the show with Lily and Olivia. Lily was very excited about seeing her boyfriend on stage, and even Celeste was looking forward to seeing the band perform again. Each band was allowed to play 2 songs, and she wondered if Addicted would play Here With You or only covers of known songs. They were among the first to arrive, because Lily wanted to get a seat in the first row. Most of the bands were pretty good, and the audience had a great time at the show. Addicted was the 4th band on stage, and they played Here With You for their first song. Celeste had almost forgotten about Dylan's magnetic stage presence. The girls in the audience went wild as he sang the sexy song in his seductive way. Celeste was glad that he didn't single her out this time, because she was already overwhelmed with unbidden memories of the passion they had shared. The song ended, and Dylan waited for the screams to die down.
This next song is called Stolen.
Now his eyes landed on Celeste as he began to sing the ballad.
What I stole consumes me whole. I never knew the lore of a heart so pure. I didn't feel this need, didn't know I'd be deceived by winning my own game, but losing you all the same. I can't find my peace of mind. Oh, it was all stolen, stolen from me. In the stolen moments of the night, it felt so right. Then the light of day took my thief away. You stayed for only a little while, but it was long enough to take my smile. Oh, it was all stolen, stolen from me. I'm searching for what you stole, but nothing fills this endless hole. Every day I ache with loneliness only you can break. Baby, when you look at me, I hope that you can see. Only you can replace what was stolen, stolen from me. Dylan's voice soared on the word stolen during the refrain, adding emotional power to the song. The impact was very different than the sexual heat the first song had expressed.
There was momentary silence as the music ended, before the audience erupted in enthusiastic applause. Dylan finally looked away from Celeste to smile at his new fans. She had felt like he was speaking to her with that song. Did he mean it? Did he have feelings for her? Or was it just another song? Celeste barely heard what the rest of the bands played. Her mind was on Dylan and what she should do now. Addicted won the Battle of the Bands, and Lily was so excited that she ran up on stage to hug Alex. He picked her up and spun her around in his exuberance. Dylan was surrounded by girls as soon as he stepped off the stage. Olivia and Celeste made their way over to congratulate Alex and the rest of the band. Jenna pulled Celeste aside. "He wrote that song about you. Don't tell him I said anything. I don't want him to bite my head off again." I wouldn't know what to say anyway. She wasn't going to fight those girls for his attention. "Well, somebody has to do something," Jenna said. "I can't handle any more of his moping." "What's wrong with him?" Celeste asked. Jenna rolled her eyes. "Take a guess." "I don't know. That's why I'm asking you." "Seriously?" Jenna asked. "Didn't you listen to the song? He's been depressed ever since you broke up with him." "He's the one who broke up with me," Celeste corrected her. "That's not what he's been telling everyone," Jenna informed her. "Oh, here he comes." Celeste turned to see Dylan approaching them. "Congratulations," she said. "Thanks." He glanced at the girls who were still nearby. "Listen, Celeste, I was hoping we could go somewhere and talk." "Yeah," she agreed. "Let me just tell Olivia. She drove me here." "Call me tomorrow," Olivia said, after Celeste explained that she was leaving with Dylan. Dylan got stopped by people in the parking lot congratulating him on his band's win. One girl even wanted to take a picture with him. "So I can prove I knew you before you were famous." Dylan posed with her while her friend took the picture. "Sorry," he said to Celeste as they continued walking to his car. "I don't mind. But it did make me realize that I don't have a picture with you," she told him. "We'll have to fix that." He took his keys out of his pocket and clicked open the car doors. "We'll have to fix everything." He looked at her then with his familiar, intense gaze. "Yeah," Celeste said. "We will." Chapter 18. "I missed you," Celeste blurted after they were seated in Dylan's car. She was too happy about being with him again to care if she sounded eager. "I missed you too, Celeste. So much. I wanted to tell you how sorry I am. It wasn't a mistake. That's the stupidest thing I've ever said." She had been hurt when he said that after she gave herself to him. So she was happy to hear him apologize. The tentative hope she'd felt when Jenna told her Dylan was depressed over her now took hold in her heart. "So you don't regret it?" More people were walking out into the parking lot. Dylan turned the key in the ignition and began to carefully pull out of his parking spot. "I want to get out of here before someone interrupts us." He drove out onto the street and away from school. "No, I don't regret it. I only regret how I reacted. It was just such a shock." "You believed the rumors about me and Tommy," she guessed. "I wasn't sure about that, but I assumed that you had sex with your boyfriend. You were dating him for months." He hadn't asked a question, but she told him the duration. 8 months. 8 months, he repeated in amazement. "How could you hold out for so long? It must have been so hard to wait." "It really wasn't," Celeste explained. "I guess my feelings for him weren't as strong as they are for you." Now that she had started talking, she decided to lay it all out in front of him. If he walked away from her this time, she would know that there was nothing left to say. "I've been thinking about that, about how you picked me. It freaked me out at first, because it seemed too important. I didn't want you to expect too much from me." "I never expected anything," she protested. "I was sure we wouldn't last long." He glanced at her. "You were?
Then why did you have sex with me?
Because I wanted to, she said simply. It was all I could think about.
Yeah?
Dylan asked with a cocky grin. Yes, she confirmed. It's funny, because I was going to prove to you that you couldn't have any girl you wanted. It turns out that I'm not any different than all your other girls. By the way, where are we going?
We're going to my house,
he answered.
You are different, Celeste.
Your house? See? That didn't take long.
It's just so we can talk alone,
he assured her.
I'm not trying anything.
How am I different? Celeste demanded.
I don't know, he admitted. I just know that the way I feel about you is different. I've never wanted to be with just one girl until I met you.
She was overwhelmed with the sudden urge to kiss him, but controlled herself until they pulled into his driveway. Celeste pounced on him as soon as he put the car in park. He was taken by surprise, but he began to kiss her back hungrily. She couldn't get close enough to him in the car, so she broke the kiss to suggest they go into the house. Dylan then remembered to turn off the car. Celeste kept her hands to herself until they entered the house and closed the door. Then she began to run her hands under his shirt while they kissed again. He pulled away from her.
I'm going to do more than talk if you keep that up. We need to cool down.
How do you expect me to cool down after watching you strutting around on stage?
Strutting around?
Dylan asked with a smirk.
Celeste, are you turning into a groupie?
Only for you, she said, as she began to walk upstairs toward his room.
I can live with that.
He followed her while she shed clothes in the hallway. She was topless when he caught up with her.
Did I ever tell you how much I like your decisiveness?
Dylan asked as his eyes roamed over her exposed flesh. Actions speak louder than words, she said, goading him into doing exactly what she wanted. Chapter 19. Celeste didn't think it would last, especially not past high school. Something that burned that hot would surely burn out quickly. She kept expecting Dylan to go back to his old ways, but he seemed content with being her boyfriend. Her parents were glad when he moved to California after high school. They were sure that the relationship would end now that Dylan and Celeste would be on opposite ends of the country. Celeste was going to college in New York to study interior design. Dylan had wanted to move to either New York or California to pursue his music career. His mom decided on California because she wanted to live somewhere warm if she was going to move to another state. She sold her house in order to help her son go after his dream.
Please don't give up on us,
Dylan pleaded with Celeste. I don't want to, but I know long-distance relationships are tough. We'll never see each other.
We can see each other every day on Skype. We'll tell each other everything just like we do now, he assured her.
But we won't get to be together, she kissed him. Not like this.
I know,
he said.
That's going to be hard. I'll understand if you don't want to wait for me, but I don't want anyone else.
She wanted to believe him. You say that now, but you'll meet other girls out there. Celeste thought about all the beautiful girls that went out to Hollywood to become famous.
You'll meet other guys, too. We can't know for sure what will happen, but I don't want to give up on what we have without even trying to make it work. Please give it a chance, he implored her.
She agreed, even though she didn't have much hope for their future. They did keep in touch over the internet and phone. He told her about the crappy little apartment he and his mom were now living in, and about the new band he had joined. She told him about college and adjusting to living in a dorm with a roommate. Celeste described the new friends she had made at school, and even mentioned the guys that had asked her out. She had told them that she had a boyfriend. Dylan was also honest about the new groupies he had attracted. He claimed he was remaining faithful to her. They had a lot to tell each other now that they were living separate lives, and they talked more than they had when they had sex to distract them. Dylan shared his doubts with her. He was worried that his mom had given up her comfortable life for nothing.
Maybe my dad was right. At least if I went to college, I would have something to show for it. I could have stayed home to play in dive bars and give free concerts at festivals.
You knew it wouldn't be easy, Celeste reminded him. Don't give up so soon.
I don't care about me. I'm just worried about my mom never having enough money to retire because of me. I told her not to go with me, but she wouldn't listen.
He had a glum expression as he looked out at her from his computer screen. Hey, she soothed him. Your mom will be okay. You're going through a rough patch right now.
I know, he sighed. Corey's driving me so crazy I'm about ready to quit the band. Maybe I should have taken that offer to be in that boy band. It couldn't be much worse than this.
Corey was their lead guitar player, and Dylan apparently couldn't stand him. They were having creative differences that they were unable to resolve. Celeste knew that he missed his old high school band, but the members had gone their separate ways. Besides being a drummer, Alex had an affinity for math. He had opted to go to college and attain a degree in a mathematical field. This information was courtesy of Lily, before she and Alex had broken up while away at different colleges. It was more proof of the difficulty of long-distance relationships, Celeste thought. Jenna was going to a community college close to home because her parents were overprotective and didn't want her living on her own with strangers. Celeste didn't know what Danny, the bass guitarist from Addicted, was doing. She still kept in touch with her best friends from high school. Olivia was studying business, and Lily was still undecided about her major. College had turned out to be as exciting for Olivia as she had imagined it would be. She had finally gotten over Andrew, and she had met her first boyfriend when she went away to school. Celeste guessed that not seeing Andrew every day had helped her move on with her life. Being away from Dylan was having the opposite effect on her. She missed him terribly, so she got a job to keep her busy while her friends were going on dates. Dylan had a job too, besides playing in a band. He was working at the same restaurant as his mom.
It's not fancy like where she was working back home, so the tips aren't as good.
He told her that everything was more expensive in California.
At least I can ride my bike year-round with the great weather here. My dad's really pissed at me for selling my car, though.
Corey ended up quitting the band, and Dylan somehow convinced Jenna to defy her parents and come out to California to be their new guitarist. She moved in with Dylan and his mom. This development put even more doubts in Celeste's mind about Dylan's fidelity to her. She believed him when he said that he and Jenna had never hooked up in the past, but they were now living under the same roof. Would they be able to resist temptation?
If you don't know how important you are to me, then you know how important my music is to me. It's not easy to keep a band together anyway without complicating things even more. My mom put everything on the line for this, and Jenna's parents are ready to disown her. We're not going to mess everything up over something stupid.
Jenna's face suddenly appeared on the screen, blocking out Dylan. Don't ever move in with him, Celeste. You won't want him either if you have to live with him.
Get out of the way. I can't see Celeste from you, he complained.
She couldn't see her, but she heard his mom speaking. These walls are so thin that we can hear each other fart in the next room. I would certainly know if they were having sex, unless my son doesn't know how to satisfy a woman.
Mom, that's inappropriate even for you.
Celeste was laughing so hard that she only heard what Dylan said next because he had raised his voice.
You two, get the hell out of my room.
It's the living room, Jenna said.
That's because I have to sleep on the couch because you took my room.
Celeste felt much better after her conversation with them. Dylan and Jenna acted too much like brother and sister to be having a sexual relationship. Her fears about groupies hadn't abated, but she had to trust him if their relationship was going to have any chance of surviving.
I did all that in high school,
he told her the next time they talked.
You'll probably be tempted to cheat on me.
Me? Why would you think that?
Because you might want to find out what it's like to be with somebody else, he said.
That thought had never crossed her mind. "I won't," she promised. "I just miss being with you."
"I have dreams about you," he confided. "Really good dreams. I hope I don't talk in my sleep."
He began to send her text messages about what he wanted to do to her. Reading them made her hot, and she responded with her own sexy thoughts. Was this what they had been reduced to? Sexting? It was a poor substitute for the real thing. Still, she wasn't interested in being with anyone else. She had to wonder, though, if they were holding on to false hopes. How long could they go on this way? Celeste made the difficult decision to spend Christmas vacation with Dylan instead of going home to see her parents. She paid for the trip herself with the money she earned from her job. When she saw his apartment, she was glad she had opted to spring for a hotel room. He hadn't been exaggerating about his cramped living conditions. She wondered if Jenna would come back after going home to visit her family. Dylan spent every night in the hotel room with Celeste while she was there. They hardly slept at all the first night, because they were insatiable for each other after so many months apart. They wouldn't get to be together like that again until the following summer, when Dylan came to visit her right before his band went on tour as the opening act for a famous band. Jenna had stuck it out with them, and they'd begun to attract real fans instead of just groupies. The tour built momentum for their career as more people heard them and liked them. They became famous enough to be the main act on their next tour. Dylan was making enough money to buy his mom a nice house in California. He and Celeste now stayed in fancy hotels when they visited each other. Her parents had finally accepted that he was part of her life. She continued working on her interior design career while Dylan lived out his rock star dreams. They had an unconventional relationship that worked for them. It helped that he could now afford to visit her more often when he wasn't away on tour or recording a new album. Celeste still had the CDs he had given her in high school. She could probably get quite a bit of money for them, but she would never want to sell them. They had been dating for 6 years when Dylan asked her to go on vacation to Greece with him. Jenna, who was now dating a guitarist from another band, complained that her parents were giving her a hard time because of them. "They're saying that I'm the one who should visit my family's homeland. I have no interest in my culture, blah, blah, blah." Celeste laughed. She and Jenna had become good friends over the years. "Why don't you come with us? I spend enough time with Dylan at work. It wouldn't be a vacation for me if he was there."
"That's the kind of gratitude I get for letting her join my band," Dylan said.
"Letting me? You begged me to come out here and save your ass," Jenna contradicted him. "She's right," Celeste interjected. "She saved your ass."
"What is this?" Dylan jokingly demanded. "First you try to ruin my vacation by inviting her, then you take her side. Some girlfriend you are."
"She's exactly the kind of girlfriend you need. Keep him in line, Celeste," Jenna urged her with glee. They flew first class to Greece and stayed a few days in Athens. Visiting the Acropolis was an amazing experience because they were seeing something that was built in ancient times. Their trip was wonderful and romantic because Dylan wasn't yet famous enough to draw attention outside of the U.S. Celeste enjoyed the modern city of Athens, but she fell in love with the island of Crete. That was where Dylan proposed to her one morning while they were taking in the gorgeous view of the Mediterranean Sea from their hotel balcony.
"Marry me, Celeste."
She turned to look at him and see if he was serious. "Are you really asking me to marry you?"
"Yes,"
he said.
"I don't have a ring for you yet, but you can pick out the one you want."
She had never expected him to propose. "You've never even said that you love me."
"I thought you knew that. You've always said that actions speak louder than words. Haven't I proven it with my actions?"
He leaned in to speak into her ear in that sexy way that always turned her on.
"Didn't I just get done proving it to you 10 minutes ago?"
The low rumble of his voice caused a delicious shiver to run through her. That was sex, not love.
"After all this time, I'd say it's love. We can get sex from other people, but we only want each other. That's too strong of a connection to be just sex.
He pulled her body against his and slipped his hand under her short nightgown to grip her bare bottom. "It's broad daylight," she protested weakly.
"Nobody can see us. We're up too high." He kissed her neck. "So, will you?"
She felt his arousal pressing against her through his boxer shorts, and it distracted her. "What?" He pulled back to look at her, but his hand moved to touch her between her legs.
"Will you marry me?"
"Yes," she cried out, in answer to both his question and to what his touch was doing to her. He picked her up and carried her back inside to the bed.
"Did I ever tell you how much I like your decisiveness?"
He was kissing her before she could answer. Her passion for Dylan had led her down a different path than she had expected to follow in her life. He hadn't gotten down on one knee and professed his love for her, but he wanted to marry her. She was happy to share her life with him, and he basically told her the same thing later at breakfast.
"Do you remember that bet we made in high school?"
Dylan asked after the waiter brought their food. "Of course I do," Celeste said. "It's how we got together in the first place. What about it?"
"I won."
He smirked at her and waited for her to go off on him. "We agreed to call it off," she reminded him.
"I still won,"
he insisted. She rolled her eyes. "Fine, you won. Does that satisfy your huge ego?"
"I'd say you know how to satisfy more than my ego."
He smiled wickedly as he touched her knee under the table. "Dylan," she hissed, "what has gotten into you?"
"I guess honeymoons turn me on."
He removed his hand from her knee, but continued to look at her in a sultry way. She took a sip of her coffee. "We're not on our honeymoon. That comes after the wedding."
"This is the practice honeymoon, then. Just imagine how turned on I'll be for the real thing."
He smiled and started to dig into his food. She loved that he still flirted with her and made an effort to seduce her. He was now a better, more mature version of the sexy Dylan she had known in high school. Celeste looked at her hot rock star fiancé. "You know what, Dylan? That's the best bet I ever made in my life."
"I know,"
he said with a cocky grin. He leaned in to give her a sweet, tender kiss. Then he whispered in her ear,
"I always knew I would win."
This has been The Evolution of a Bad Boy, written by Susanna Thompson, narrated by Sarah Sampino. Copyright 2013 by Susanna Thompson. Production copyright by Susanna Thompson.